Okay. Okay, so shall we make a start then? 6 o'clock. Just wait for these people to come in. Good evening. If you want to come in and take a seat, we'll get going as soon as everybody's sat down. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to this meeting of the Future Council Scrutiny Committee here at the Town Hall, which is being webcast live on YouTube. So we'll get underway. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have from Councillor Lees and Councillor Roberts.
Okay, and do we have any substitute members?
Yes, we've got substitute members are Councillor Atkins and Councillor Collins, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And have we got any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct? No, okay. Number 4, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meetings held on the 1st and the 8th of September as a correct record. Does everybody agree they're a correct record? Happy? Yep, thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to agenda item number 5, which is a update on the Black Country Plan consultation and engagement process. And I'm going to hand over to Phil Parker from the communications team.
Thank you very much, Chair. During this short presentation, I hope to provide an overview to Scrutiny of the multi-layered and multi-channel approach that we've taken to the Black Country Plan consultation. Before I move on to the detailed slides, I think it's important to note what the role and the objective of the marketing activity has been, and that has been to try to drive people towards the website and towards pick-up points in libraries and reception areas. So it's about clear, concise messaging to encourage people to take part with an opportunity to go to the website to do so. If we could move on the slide, please, Steve. Thank you. So this slide is just a very brief overview of what I will cover, and I think the main things to pull out for members here really is in relation to the two-tiered approach, the two layers, and that is both one being a regional level for the whole of the Black Country, which Dudley has led on, and then also the localised communications that have taken place within each of the 4 local authority areas, led by each of the communications teams based at those authorities. And again, please, Steve, thank you. So the agreed approach. Dudley Council has led on the communications on behalf of the Black Country authorities. Since 2017, we've been playing a key role in the activity on this. Each local authority then takes responsibility at their local level with advice and guidance from ourselves to ensure a consistent approach. These plans have all been approved through all of those local authorities, all 4 local authorities, both through the planning departments, senior officer level, and also with member engagement at each step of the way. If we could carry on, please, Steve. So just looking at this then, and in terms of that 2-layered approach that I referenced earlier, so at a local level, the 4 councils have all used what you might term sort of free-to-use communications channels that we've got at our disposal. Things like social media, our e-bulletins that we all issue, and obviously media relations with our local and regional media as well. These channels have no paid-for cost associated to them, and it's fair to say in local government, on a day-to-day basis, they make up most of the communications activities for councils up and down the country. However, the second layer, it was recognised was needed for a consultation as important and as significant as this. So a budget was put forward for a paid-for campaign to support that local level activity, which, as I say, Dudley has led on. And if we can move on to the next slide, please, Steve. This slide just demonstrates a breakdown of where that paid-for activity has gone, just to reassure members and members of the public in terms of where that has gone in terms of a multi-channel approach to ensure that we try to get that message out as far and wide as we possibly can through as many channels as possible. I think, as we'll all recognise, in today's society, people get their news and information from a variety of means, and hopefully through this method of both traditional printed mediums together with online digital, we get a good mix to hopefully get the message as far and wide as we can, as I say, to encourage people to go to places like the website if it's online, or to go to physical library settings to take a look and find the more complex detail that's within the consultation, which we fully recognise is a very complex and detailed piece that can't simply be done through a simple communication. So people need to be pointed in direction to read more, find out more, and to participate in the consultation. I think the other point, just finally on that slide, is by doing this, as opposed to maybe a one big bang approach of one communication going out, you get a drip feed of communications through multi-channels that are going out across the whole 8 weeks of the consultation campaign. If we could carry on, please, Steve. So I'll quickly go through the slides. It picks out some of those individual channels, but the bus backs that people may well have seen over the last 7 weeks, as we head now into the 8th week, on 100 buses across the Black Country. Huge reach, very, very popular outdoor advertising platform that we've exploited for this campaign. If we can carry on, please, Steve. The Express and Star, obviously one of the largest regional newspapers still in the country. Significant figures, as you can see on the screen there, in terms of the readership, and as well as the editorial content of working through media relations and issuing media releases to the reporters working on there, also paid for advertising placed within the Express and Star throughout the consultation period. Thanks, Steve. And then in terms of, although social media, as I said earlier, is obviously can be a free-to-use medium, we've also done paid-for promoted posts across Facebook and Instagram with huge reach on there. As you can see, 260,000 plus impressions. There's opportunities to see effectively for people across those channels. The 4.7 CTR, apologies for that, is the click-through rate that people have picked up. Just to put that into perspective, the average click-through rate on these channels is 1%. So that's a really high click-through rate of people that were looking to engage and find out more detail of this as it was landing on their social media feeds. And then the clicks there as well are significant as people click through. And obviously the video plays, as it states in front of you, over 200,000 video plays of the consultation video to outline how people could get involved. Thanks, Steve. Free radio, I think we can move on really, Steve. Just to show you the reach, obviously we know free radio is one of the largest commercial stations in the region, if not the. And then also at a very local level, community radio, Black Country Radio, based obviously in Dudley Borough, also with advertising across that radio. So both of those stations used for the full 8 weeks of the campaign to try to raise awareness. Okay, thanks, Steve. And I've included on there the printed materials because I think they made up about £15,000 worth of that £50,000 outlay. And obviously that's in relation to the printed consultation documents, the summary forms that we needed to get out in mass to those library settings, to the reception areas, so that people who maybe aren't as digitally enabled can take part in the consultation through that sort of hard copy form. Thanks, Steve. And then moving back, apologies slightly there, into those 2 layers that I talked of. This is the free to use stuff, so not paid for additional stuff, but stuff that we've done within Dudley, at Dudley Council, in terms of exploiting our channels that we manage. And that's some of the reach that we've got through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube, as you can see. Really significant figures of engagement there that people have picked up on. I think the other point that I'd raise at that stage is almost a third layer, if you like, which is word of mouth and digital word of mouth, that when we post the initial content onto Facebook and the likes, this is where the community groups get involved, which is great, and they share the information and engage with each other and with local members to get involved in the consultations. That is all part of that wider mix as well. Thanks, Steve. And then again at that local level, just within Dudley Borough, and what we've delivered. This is slightly out of date now. I think this was at the start of last week, that the 4 e-bulletins have been issued to and opened by 20,000 borough residents. We issued another one yesterday as a final reminder piece, obviously with days to go now through to October the 11th for the close of the consultation, so that reach will increase there. We also did include the article in the Your Borough, Your Home magazine, which went out in August. I believe it was week commencing August the 23rd. Unfortunately, at that time, in terms of the publication dates, I believe it went to print in July, end of July, which made it unable to do more detailed content in there, but there's certainly a full column piece that outlined it and pointed people to the website again to find out more, which is, like I say, really the objective of the communications activity. And that final point there is around media coverage, which is the editorial side of it. So it's the press office, essentially, at the council, issuing proactively to the media in the time of the consultation, and just before, I think it was the start of August, 11 news releases to try to raise the profile through editorial news stories in the local and regional press, which I think we've seen plenty, and also handled 16 reactive inquiries, which have been picked up on the back of comments by elected members or campaign groups, and so on and so forth, where, again, more articles have given the Black Country Plan consultation more exposure in the media. If we could move on, please, Steve. Just added this one in with reference to the previous Scrutiny Committee, which I believe was at the very start of September, a couple of weeks into the consultation. And this is localised content again for Dudley. So whilst we have set a Black Country-wide comms plan, consistent across the region, each area has then got its specific own local channels. And in Dudley, we've also listened to what was said at that first scrutiny. I believe we're the only authority of the 4 to be going through a scrutiny process while the consultation's on. And we didn't want to sit on our hands when we're hearing stuff coming out of it, so we've looked to add additional activity in there on the back of that. And as you can see, we've looked at the Black Country website, we picked up the points around the portal. Unfortunately, that is externally managed, so we don't have direct access to the actual planning portal. However, we have simplified the website and put a simple, easy-to-use form on there, which I think has improved the process significantly. We also printed an additional 27,000 comments forms. This was on the back of specific requests from the community, so the vast majority of those went to specific named individuals who were interested in getting bulk loads of comment forms, so they've gone out, as well as we look to be absolutely as open and transparent, as accommodating as possible. We also produced a direct mail flyer for all borough residents and commissioned delivery through Royal Mail, which was to take place week commencing September the 27th, which was last week. And also those additional face-to-face drop-in sessions and public meetings have also been held in terms of the engagement side of things with planning colleagues throughout the period as well, from the 20th to the 29th. Thanks, Steve. As I said at the outset, this is the final slide, but as I said at the outset, the objective of the comms and the marketing really is to try to drive traffic towards the website so that people can find out more information about this complex subject matter and to engage in the consultation if they wish to. As I've explained, we've used a multi-channel approach to try to do that and reach as far and wide as we possibly can. And hopefully that has gone some way to do it. As you can see, the figures there in terms of those web hits, 43,800. I think that was at the start of this week. When we checked yesterday, I think that's already gone up to 45,000. So there's still clearly in these final days a significant amount of traffic heading to the website, which is really positive and good as more people look to engage. I hope that short presentation has answered some questions, but at the same time, I'm happy to field any more questions that members may have. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil. A good presentation and good to see you've taken on some of the feedback from the scrutiny committees that we've done previously to this one. Just to confirm, did I hear you right in saying that none of the other local authorities are doing a scrutiny process whilst the consultation is going on? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we're the only ones doing this process while the consultation. Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up questions to members. The public forum is coming up afterwards, and Phil is going to stick around if there's any questions relating to the communications from the public. But members, have we got any questions? Phil, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'll add my thanks as well. It's a really detailed presentation and really useful. It answers a lot of questions. I've just got a really straightforward question, I hope. £51,000 for the total paid media, I believe, was on that slide, 51,128 or something. And you've said about the multi-layered approach. So a question I'm being asked a lot is, was there a quote for just posting a letter to every single resident? I don't mean a pizza flyer, I mean an actual A4 letter, double-sided, with some information on, to every household in the borough. What was that quote and why was it discounted?
If we'd done it at the outset of the consultation, a full letter drop to the whole of the Black Country, which it would have needed to be in terms of being fair and equal across the board at that point to notify the whole of the Black Country, it would have been well in excess of the £51,000 budget. And my professional concern on just doing that, if we'd just done that, would have been that one opportunity when that arrives as a letter in an envelope, dear householder, is we don't know how many people are actually going to open that and see it. And then over that 8-week period, the chance and potential has gone to get that message out through the paid for medium. We could have obviously followed that up through the channels that I've outlined that we're free to use. It could have been another option in that way, but it would have been out of the budget window that we were working with.
Okay. Thanks. Chris, you had a question?
A couple. Thanks for the presentation, Phil. I'm curious about just a little thing about the website and web hits, because web hits are made up of all sorts of wonderful stuff from the internet, including search engines. So do you actually know how many unique visitors that represents? And just a comment really about the, we talked about a letter being delivered to everyone, and that was partially done with the leaflets being delivered, but as you said, it's easy for these things to get ignored, and the leaflets indeed arrived inside a pizza advert with an advert from a local estate agent in the front of it, and I found mine, but I was looking for it, and they are quite easy to discard too. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. In terms of the web hits, obviously it's still a live issue, so the figures are continually changing, and we can get a full report on close of consultation, no problem at all. I believe I'm right in saying that the 45,000 that we're at the moment on hits, if you looked at unique sessions when people are actually going and actively looking, it's about 32,000, and I think I'm right in saying that unique individuals is around 10,000.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, Chair, and the other point on the full borough distribution, it's a fair comment. With experience of working with different distribution companies, I would say that Royal Mail is the most reliable that we can look to work through. But yeah, it's fair that these correspondence can go through the letterbox on different postal rounds with other materials.
Has that delivery finished now? Because I have had reports from residents that they haven't had one. Yeah. And I know you're going to get some people that someone will have come in the house, picked it up, put it in the recycling, and the other people in the house don't know about it. But I have had a couple of streets sort of tell me that they haven't had one. So have we got any recourse with Royal Mail if that's the case, if we let you know who those are?
Please, Chair. Yeah, the Royal Mail arrangement is, as I say, which we've produced the leaflets for 140,000 plus to go to every single household. And the arrangement with Royal Mail is for that to have taken place week commencing September the 27th, which was last week, to include the Saturday. So if people didn't get it after that, if you could, through yourself, if we can get any specific postcodes, we can take that up with Royal Mail, because obviously that would be disappointing from our end, because we did everything within our powers.
So if we do get any reports, then it's worth looking into. Thank you. Councillor Issa? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Phil. Obviously, it seems that we have done a lot of activity and a lot of actions, but the question, and spent a lot of money as well. This question is that have we managed to reach people that we tended to reach because one of the concerns had all along been the shortness of time might preclude a lot of people. And when we say shortness of time, we actually meant the effectiveness of the consultation. So we've held face-to-face, I'm going to stick to two areas. We've held face-to-face consultations between the 20th and 29th of September, and we've held 5 public meetings. So if I please ask, how many people actually came to the drop-in sessions, the face-to-face drop-in sessions? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, how many people attended the 5 public meetings? And putting everything together, did we manage to reach people who lived around small green spaces? If you recall, Chair, one of the huge concern I had at the very beginning of this process was that whilst quite rightly people in the larger, people where larger areas are concerned will have a lot of interest, and there will be a lot of people who will have a lot of expertise to use their concerns and channel their concerns and raise their issues. But people who were living around smaller areas with small spaces will not have that privilege and will not be in that position to effectively engage with this consultation. So those are the 2 questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Carl, are you going to answer those?
I'm just waiting for some information on the drop-in sessions, which I think Claire might have. But in terms of the public meetings, we've had 4 so far, and we've had attendance from around 650 to 700 people at those sessions. There's another session to go tomorrow night in Stourbridge Town Hall, which will add to that number. And I think Claire might have the number for the drop-in sessions.
Thank you. So 99 people came to the face-to-face drop-in sessions and 26 logged into the virtual Q&A session.
Did I hear that, Chair? Is it 99 and 27?
99 and 26, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it was nearly 700 to the public meetings, yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Baton, you had a question?
Thanks, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak, since I'm not formally a member of this committee, so thank you for that. And thank you, Phil, for your presentation. I'm a bit unsure as to why this presentation wasn't included in the agenda pack. Normally, if we're going to have a presentation of a report at a meeting, it normally comes out with the papers, unless it's in other paper. I only have the agenda, so maybe there's some additional papers I don't have, but normally report presentations are sent out with the paperwork so that we've all got time to have a look at them and do some research prior to the meeting if required. So I just wanted to pick up on, am I whistling? I wanted to pick up on the "you said" slide, if that's okay, Phil. And you answered Chris Barnett's question about 10,000 unique visits to the site, but 48,000, I think, was it 48,000 impressions, but 10,000 unique visits? So am I right in thinking that it's 10,000 unique people who visited multiple times? Is that correct?
Sorry, Councillor, it's quite complex, as Councillor Barnett pointed out with web stats. It's 10,000 individual people.
Yeah.
The 40,000 is actual web hits, any click on pages within the website.
Right.
There is then also a 32,000 statistic, which is the unique page views, which are sessions when people are actually fully engaged in. So that would be those 10,000 people going back maybe 3 times each on average.
Right, that's really helpful,
yeah.
Because a lot of the feedback I've received is that the website is still, even after whatever tweaks have been made, very difficult to navigate. And if somebody is requiring to go back perhaps 3 times to complete their paper or to think about it and go back because they really don't know how to get through that website, then that's saying to me that that website really isn't user-friendly and fit for purpose. And that's certainly information that's coming back from the public that I've picked up, and I'm guessing other people have had the same. So, thank you.
Do you want to come back on that, Phil?
Yeah, only very quickly, in terms of, I think we fully recognise, which is the purpose of that slide, that the planning portal was difficult to navigate. The actual web page within the Black Country Plan website is simplified now, and whilst it may be 3 visits because of technical issues or complexities, I think the actual complexity of the consultations, well, people may well visit, it's anecdotal, but people may well need to visit to read detail, to look at the content as well, rather than just pop into the site to complete the consultation in one go, potentially.
That's not the feedback that we're getting on the street. The feedback that we're still receiving is that this website is not fit for general purpose. If you are not particularly IT savvy, it is proving very problematic for people to navigate. And I think it's really important that we continue to flag that up. Thank you.
Yeah, it was raised at the last scrutiny. I suppose we'll see, once we get the responses to the consultation, how many were done via the website, how many were done on the paper ones that you've been printing, like Billio for us, because we have had to give a lot of paper comments forms out because the website hasn't been too easy. So certainly, for future consultations, it's definitely something we need to think about. We would have put the presentation in the pack, but because it's got sort of live stats on there, they would have all been out of date. So we wanted to keep it as fresh as possible with the most up-to-date figures on there. Okay, Councillor Ali, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Phil, for the presentation. Just a clarification. I mean, at the start you said that Dudley is leading on the communication side across the Black Country. So I just want to clarify the statistics you presented. Are these for Dudley only, or are these across the Black Country?
Thanks, Councillor. The web statistics that we're referencing are across the Black Country on the Black Country Plan website, across the whole of the Black Country.
Okay, so are you able to, through your chair, drill down and let us know how many people from across Dudley have interacted or engaged through the social media? Because as Councillor Baton said earlier on, and the issue we were hearing at the last meeting, Scrutiny Committee meeting, was public were finding it really difficult to kind of navigate through the website. And so I think, we'll hear hopefully in a few moments when people get an opportunity to air their views on the consultation. But are you able to also kind of do any further analyses in terms of where across the borough we've had these hits from or engagements from?
Thanks, Councillor. I think in terms of drilling down to locality, once the consultation's closed, we will be able to do that, to look at where that's come from. And just to pick up a point that you made, during the presentation, the social media statistics that were on one of the slides was very much the localised Dudley Borough statistics. It was a mix of the two, as I say, those 2 layers, Black Country wide and Dudley. But you're right with your point, in terms of the overall figure that we're looking at with web hits, that is the whole of the Black Country, but we will look to drill down for you. I'm not sure in terms of ward level. I assume we can, because there'll be named individuals that have taken part, but I'm looking to planning colleagues on that to confirm.
Yeah, we'll be able to identify where comments have come from, whether that might not be the same as web users necessarily, but the comments have come from, sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rogers, I saw yours, and then Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Phil. So can I just, I'm a bit confused there. Some of the information was Black Country wide, and some of it was just Dudley. It's a bit confusing, really, especially as Councillor Baton's just alluded to, that we haven't had the report or the presentation beforehand. It's a bit confusing for us tonight. Can I just ask also how much the commissioned direct mail flyer was for all Dudley Borough residents through the Royal Mail?
In terms of the presentation, the paid for costs was Black Country wide, just for clarity. The other slides that showed localised content was Dudley specific, just to pick up that first point. And in terms of the overall costings for Royal Mail, I'm just checking my notes here, which I believe is a total of £18,000.
Yeah, that's including the cost of the flyer as well. So it was for Royal Mail, it was £15,573.60.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I realise, as you say, it's not that fair just doing Dudley and not including the other 3 areas of the Black Country, but really you've just done that for Dudley as a response from the consultation, which is great, and listening to the public, but really I think that should have been done beforehand. And you say it's only it's 13,000 was spent on bus adverts on the back of buses, but I think for an extra 5,000 you could have done that beforehand, send a letter to all the residents, which would have been more personable. I think they would appreciate that better, and I think you can include a lot more information on a flyer going into what's involved, what is the Black Country Plan, have your say. You can go into what it is it going to be including employment, the green belt, housing, all parts of the Black Country Plan, rather than just Black Country Plan, have your say, here's the website on the back of a bus, which is 13,000. I think that could have been better spent, and that was a bit of a waste of money, really. So it would be good to get the figures afterwards when they all come back. It's encouraging, like you say, on the other hand, that we've got all these clicks on Facebook, 201,000, 123 copies in the magazine, and 43,000 web hits when there's 312,000 residents in Dudley. So I think that's quite encouraging, really.
Thanks, Councillor.
Okay, thanks. Do you want to come back on that or no? Anything?
I don't think there's anything specific to come back
questions,
on.
yeah.
Point noted in
yeah.
terms of the perspective.
Councillor Foster?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that the meeting that we had on the 1st of September highlighted that there are lots of areas for development in terms of the Council's consultation processes and also public participation processes. And I'm disappointed to hear Councillor Baton give examples of people that she's heard from who still don't think that the website is fit for purpose, and I've certainly heard people say that as well. I've been on this council now 23 years, and we never seem to be able to get consultation and community engagement right. And the irony of it is about 10 years ago, the council was recognised for its public engagement processes, but only in as much as they were written down on paper. We never seem to get them right in practice. And I think that probably there's a lot being learned from this process. A lot of the issues that Phil presented to us, the things, you said we did, a lot of those issues were actually highlighted the day that the consultation was launched and have only fairly recently been addressed, and that's a disappointment. But moving forward, can I suggest that because it is in the remit of this committee, that there is a paper presented to us to look at consultation for the future? Because I don't think we can afford to keep making the same mistakes going forward. There are going to be many difficult decisions and many difficult issues that we're going to have to consult the public about again in the future, I have no doubt, and we must get this process right. So can I make that recommendation?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. And I think a couple of years ago, when it was corporate scrutiny, we did actually do an exercise on consultations, if I remember rightly. So maybe we need to look back at that and see what that came out with. But I would say, yes, we've got things wrong, but because of this scrutiny process going on while the consultation is going on, we've been able to make these changes. We've been able to produce a leaflet. Okay, it might not be the silver bullet, but it's at least got the message out there and got more people to engage. We discussed that we weren't having enough public meetings, so we put more public meetings on. So it's only because we're going through this scrutiny process during the consultation, which no other local authorities are, that we've been able to improve things But yes, we still need to learn lessons.
Absolutely right, Chair. The only thing I would say is it shouldn't take a scrutiny process to get consultation right. You know, we've had an exercise 2 years ago where you looked at consultation. The question I would raise is why aren't any good practice or recommendations from that in place for this exercise without scrutiny having to point it out?
Yeah, always learning and always evolving. Did you want to come back, Phil, on any of those points?
I don't think so, really. I mean, in terms of consultation and engagement, it's a remit that would need to come back to scrutiny, I think, through colleagues in public health as well who lead on engagement, community engagement, and we could pick that up as a full piece to come back through to scrutiny.
Definitely, thank you. Any other questions? So just see a hand, Councillor Islam. Yeah.
Just a brief one, following from both Phil and Councillor Foster. I think what we have learned it the hard way, and considering that this particular consultation is going to impact the whole of the borough, and certain parts more than others, and certain parts more deeply than others, and also the number of years this consultation and the outcome of this consultation will affect coming generations as well. So the time span is quite long as well. So I think whatever we have learned from this consultation would be extremely useful if we can follow up the suggestion from Councillor Foster and say that we will visit the consultation process so that we don't learn as we go along, but we have, by and large, a better blueprint for consultation. And then if we have to learn something, that would be icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, take your point, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, so that wraps up that item then. We're going to move on to the public forum, but before I do, we've obviously got councillors and officers from the council. We've also got some expert witnesses as well tonight that we've invited. Unfortunately, we didn't get them a table, so they are sat on the front row. But I didn't know whether they just wanted to come up to the microphone before we start, just to introduce yourselves, where you're from, and sort of, who you are and where you're from, really, just so the people in the audience know. Yeah, that's coming next.
Discuss the matter of the communications, and there's some things I want to bring up about.
Yeah.
There will be an opportunity to go back on the ground we've already covered.
Yeah, the communications guys are staying for the public session, so if you've got questions for them, they will be here for that. Okay, I just want to introduce our visitors so that everybody knows who's here and where they're from. So if you're one of our invited guests, if you just pop up to the microphone and introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Richard Sadlier, School Place Planning.
Dean Hubbard, Transportation.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Griffiths, Head of Assets and Development in Housing and Communities at Dudley.
Stuart Everton, Black Country Director of Transport.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Howells. I'm the Head of Estate for the Black Country West Birmingham Clinical Commissioning Group, NHS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everybody. So we've got representatives for education, highways, housing, transport and the CCG. So if you've got, this is for councillors as well. That's the extra witnesses we've got tonight, as well as obviously the comms team and the planning officers. So we'll move over to the public forum. We normally allow 30 minutes for the public forum. However, I am willing to extend this if we need to, if there's more questions that want to be asked. And we will limit it to 5 minutes per question. We've got a list of people that would like to ask a question. So we shall go through the list, and then if there's any extras, then just let me know. So the first person is Kat Eccles. Is she here? No, okay. Paul Watson. Thanks, Paul.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everybody. You've just heard my name's Paul Watson. I'm a resident of Stourbridge, but I've lived in the borough for the vast majority of my life. You should also know I'm a chartered and practising town planner. Chair, this committee meets this evening to consider the emerging Black Country Plan. And the first thing I should say is that I don't envy the council or its officers in the task of preparing this plan. Balancing the pressing need for example, new housing, especially affordable homes, with the myriad constraints such as land stability and contamination, highway capacity and so on. Balancing those concerns with of a rightly vocal public for the quality of life and environmental challenges facing the borough and the Black Country, and indeed our planet. In preparing plans such as this, Chair, the issue of the role and the future of the Green Belt is always difficult and emotional. In my view, I have to say, and on my experience, it's often more heat than light, but it is emotional and it is technically difficult. But in that furore, it's important not to lose sight of other vital components of the Black Country's green infrastructure, and especially the value of urban green spaces. These oases of green in otherwise built-up areas are the remnants of what is often called the endless village of the Black Country. Not a sprawling conurbation, but an agglomeration of distinct settlements and communities, first founded around smaller scale industries such as nail and chain making. This network or patchwork quilt of green spaces, countryside now captive in an urban area, is a key part of the history and identity of the Black Country communities and its unique geography and landscape. These urban green spaces provide a rich ecology and a nature conservation interest often greater than that of manicured parks or farmland. And they provide places on the doorstep for vital rest, relaxation and refreshing the mind and body. Chair, the protection of and enhancement of these urban green spaces is to me the non-negotiable of plan making. Therefore, Chair, I welcome the policies of the Black Country Plan which protect these green spaces. And I've got, just to be technically correct and help the notes, in particular policy ENV 5 about historic character and local distinctiveness, and policy ENV 8 around open spaces. But I especially applaud, Chair, the proposed designation of Corbett Meadow as a local green space. It's an essential recognition of its history, qualities and potential, and it's a warning shot to predatory developers. These sorts of policies, Chair, show the way forward for the Black Country, and I hope they can be endorsed by this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody wish to make a comment on that? No, yeah, Councillor.
Chair, just a general point. These presentations that are being made, obviously they've been recorded, but will the papers presented become part of the consultation process? And if so, can we have the copies as we go along?
Yeah, I'm sure the gentleman will submit his, as part of his response.
I've got a typed version of this, and I'm happy to send it to the officers when I get back home.
That's fine. If you include it as part of your consultation response, that'd be great, yeah. I also forgot to mention that we've got Councillor Patrick Harley, Leader of the Council, and also Councillor Simon Phipps, who's the Cabinet Member leading on the Black Country Plan. They're also here tonight to answer any questions directed at them.
Councillor Zarda from the Opposition Leader is here as well, just for your information.
Right. Where?
He's in the audience somewhere. There he is.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see you over there behind Simon. Okay, thank you. Malcolm Chilton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee, for letting me speak. My name is Malcolm Chilton. I'm a resident of Kings Winford and have been a resident of the borough for about 60-odd years. I've been looking at the projections for growth and population growth that have formed the basis of this plan. And I have come to the conclusion that they are hopelessly unrealistic and present very much a worst case, which does result in more houses being required, and of course some of those houses being built on green belt land. Why do I think this? Well, the projections are made by the Office for National Statistics, and they comprise two parts. Firstly, what's called natural growth, that's the excess of births over deaths, and secondly, net international migration. And those two parts are not equal at all. The plan predicts that net international migration will represent 84% of the growth of population in the borough over the period of the plan. It's interesting that back in the early 90s, net international migration was practically zero. So the number of people leaving the country more or less equal the people coming to the country. But at the moment, we know that we've gone through a period of unprecedented population growth over the last 25 years. And so it's worth looking at what assumptions have been made in the ONS's predictions for net international migration. And the assumption is that it will continue at the rate it's been at for the last 25 years. So it will be exactly the same, there'll be no change. The ONS are very clear that they will ignore the impact of any political change, and in particular Brexit. So is that a realistic assumption? I don't think so. And we don't have much data on the impact of Brexit yet on population growth. But there are 3 years' worth of data that have come out since the Brexit referendum, but prior to the pandemic, which of course will have really messed up all the statistics. Prior to the referendum, net international migration from the EU was running at about 200,000 people per year. In 1917, 18 and 19, it was running at about 50,000 people per year. So that's been the first signs of the impact of Brexit. So it is having a significant impact and should be taken into account, even though the ONS have made it clear that they have not taken it into account. That is the reason why I think these projections are worst case and totally unrealistic. The ONS admit that they don't know what the future population will be, and they're really just presenting scenarios. They do present several other scenarios. A key one is, instead of looking back over 25 years, they look back over 10 years. 10 years will miss out some of the very high periods of growth that we've seen in the past. And if we use that data set, which is an official data set, it results in a population growth in the Black Country 30,000 less than the numbers that have been proposed in the plan. That means around about 10,000 fewer dwellings. As we're all aware, the plan suggests that we should be building about 7,000 dwellings on greenbelt land. So if this alternative scenario, which is equally valid, I would argue more valid, is used, then there'd be no need for any houses to be built on green belt land whatsoever throughout the whole of the Black Country. And it has even greater significance using this different scenario because the same issues apply in South Staffordshire and Shropshire and anywhere else that's making a plan at the moment in the way we're doing in the Black Country. So I see this as very significant, and I don't believe that the boroughs should be approving the Black Country plan until this particular issue excuse me, has been bottomed out. This is wrong. It's hopelessly unrealistic, and we're sacrificing our green belt for no good reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chilton. Carl, if you want to take that one.
Thank you, Chair. We've had similar conversations. I recognise there's a number of quarters a concern over the standard method that we're required to use. Now, we are required to use a standard method, which uses the ONS data that you referred to. And until that changes, that's the only the only target that we can try to achieve. It's 76,000 houses at the moment. I think an important point that you raised was really about a misapprehension about how if we find additional houses in urban areas, or if there's a change in projections that reduces the number that we need, that will equate to not going to the green belt. Unfortunately, the first thing we have to do is try to hit the 76,000 target. So if there is an additional 10,000 off that target to say 66,000, that does not mean that we can't yet go into the green belt. Until we meet our need through urban supply alone, the green belt issue will still exist, unfortunately. So I recognise the point, and obviously a lower target would be good for us. If we can find more houses in Brownfield, that will also be good for us. But at the moment, we're some way short of that target. So it's not simply a case of replacing a new number that exceeds the 7,000 projected in the green belt. But in terms of your points on the projections, I absolutely understand your concerns, and I'm aware that the leaders of all four Black Country authorities have shared those same concerns with government. Until we get a change in approach, we obviously as officers can't change our recommendations, but that might still happen in the next couple of years of the plan.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Next question is from Sue Pearson. Oh, sorry, Chief. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me ask this of Carl. What response did you get back from government? I think residents would be interested in hearing what the response was to the representations made by the Black Country leaders about the projections. What response did you get? What did they say?
Through you, Chair. We don't have a response in terms of there is no difference. We still have to work to the same projections. All that's happened is we have, as a Black Country, reported our issues and concerns to ministers so that they are aware.
Right, but they've not actually responded formally.
Well, no, in as much as this is a national method. So if there's any future changes, there is a planning white paper. So if there are future changes, then that's the process it would go through. But for this plan at this point, then we only have that methodology to follow.
So the leaders have raised their concerns.
Yep.
And that's,
Yeah, so the leaders have presented their concerns, but there hasn't been any response to that.
Not as yet, no. Okay, we've got Councillor Ali. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I say that very pertinent points have been raised by Mr. Chilton. And obviously, the calculations have been done or assumptions been made on data which is not relevant or it has changed over time. So I think it is really important that we shouldn't say that we haven't had a response from government, but what we need to do is look locally, and we need to look to our Public Health Department locally, and maybe the Public Health England or whatever it's called now, UK HSA. So we try and refresh the data, do an exercise to see what that shows us for Dudley. We might not be able to change whatever's in the document, but at least if we can get that refreshed data into the assumptions, local work done, then at least we can make some recommendations on the back of that, or it might at least point us to the direction in terms of what we as a scrutiny committee, what decisions or recommendations we make. So I think it's really important that we do task our Public Health Director and her team, or across the wider Black Country or across the region, to do that piece of work.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a big piece of work to undertake, but it could just be sort of overridden. So I think obviously the leader of the council has the concerns about the numbers and is pushing government. So let's see what response we do get once this consultation period is over. Remember, it is only a draft plan, and there can be changes made.
I think, Chair, if I can come back, I mean, obviously if Councillor Harley is pressing the government to get whatever information, that's all fine, but it's important for us to do that work locally. And, when we're saying it's a lot of work, it isn't, because the Public Health Director should be able to get one of her team, data analysts, to look at the data, the recent ONS information that's been published, and try and put that into the equation or the formula and see what that shows us. Mm-hmm. I mean, it might just, there'll be kind of assumptions on that, but it will give some indication, so it's really important.
Yeah, we could ask it how big a task it is, and if it's easily, you know, doable, and it could show us some of the points that Mr. Chilton's made.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sue Pearson.
I'm representing the residents of one of the much smaller sites for a proposal of 7 Drive in Pensnet. I've got 2 questions. Firstly, why was 7 Drive removed from the original plan and then put back in? And then secondly, given that Dudley Council appears to be child-friendly, recently publishing pictures of young children playing on green spaces, calling Dudley our borough, our home, and given the benefits from people's mental health regarding green spaces, why are you proposing to remove such a vital space from our area? Can I draw your attention to the RAG rating document that more or less suggests 3 alternatives as potential areas that children could play? Firstly, Derwent Close, which is a small rectangular area of green space. It's currently on an incline, it's really uneven. There's currently a no ball game sign on that, and it's also next to a busy road. Secondly, Mayflower Drive, which is a smaller, squarer area, again that's quite uneven. There was formerly a play area on this space, and that was removed, suggesting that it was an inappropriate site in the first place. Thirdly, there's an area to the south of Butterfield Road described in the document as hummocky and of an awkward shape. So given all of that, I'd like to know why the council would remove such a vital green space, and I'd like to invite anybody to come and play a game of football on any of those aforementioned areas.
Thank you. Carl?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. Yeah, in terms of the first part of that question, which is why it was removed and then put it back in, it was never, this is the draft plan, this is the first time any sites have been recommended, but essentially I think you're referring to the call for sites process, so effectively did a call for sites process on 2 occasions. Initially that site, and it was actually quite a slightly larger site than what's in the draft plan, was put forward. It was then removed by the submitter, but we reassessed that site as part of the open space assessments. So we've looked at all of our open spaces in terms of quality and value, and we've assessed those as well as part of this process to make sure we've done a comprehensive check of all the land available. So that's why it was assessed, and there was 2 elements, and the northern part of that site was then subsequently included in the draft. In terms of the reference to the RAG rating for the public, that's affected the document, the assessment document that was undertaken by officers that gave us an ability to filter out sites, and it's been a transparent process. We've got that available. So reference was made to other areas in the vicinity. That's not to mean they're as good or as or serve the same function as this particular area. It's just to make the point that there are other amenity spaces in a walking distance of this particular site. As I've said before, this is a balancing exercise. So in that RAG rating, we've actually rated it amber. We recognise there's concerns with losing green spaces such as this, but we also have to balance that against the other factors in that assessment. So we note the concern. We don't think necessarily it's the same or as good a quality as the site that we're talking about necessarily. It's just making a point that it's not the only green space in the area. Thank you.
Okay, anybody want to add to that? Councillor Cowell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's kind of an aside to the process itself, but something a lady did say was that photos of children were included, potentially without their consent. I mean, that's something that we shouldn't be... I mean, obviously that kind of goes back to the publicity type process. We do need to be careful about what we're doing.
Okay, Phil?
Through you, Chair, I think it's an unconnected issue in terms of that bit of misinterpretation, possibly with Councillor Cowell. This was the Child Friendly Dudley campaign that was launched through the Your Borough, Your Home magazine that I think the resident was referring to. All consent was in place for those children as part of that campaign.
Yeah, I would hope that we're using images with consent. So, yeah, thank you. Anybody want to come back on the point made by Mrs. Pearson? No, thank you. All I'd say is you've made some really valid points, and they need to go into your consultation response. And, you know, if you've got residents in that area fighting, get those points put in by all the residents and get as many responses as you can. We've got to remember that although we're going through the scrutiny process, the comments forms and the feedback and the responses are what we need before Monday at 5 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Karen Westwood.
Good evening, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of Bryce Road residents, which is in Pensnet. And one of the sites here marked is Bryce Road Field at the top end of Bryce Road. Looking at the RAG assessments, I noted that it says there that there's no known biodiversity or geodiversity on that site. I just wanted to ask the question on how that has been concluded, because I can tell you for a fact, as a resident who lives very close to the field, there is a wide range of wildlife present on that site. In fact, we had a wildlife officer visit the site a couple of weeks ago, and he confirmed that there are definitely established badger sites on Bryce Road Field. Also in the RAG assessment, it states that there's still a requirement for a survey on all the mature trees on that site. So that's something that we would like to be looked into and given some sort of date on that. Also, some of the residents in the street that I've spoken to seem to think that there's already some sort of leisure-related designation of the site that was previously put on the field there. Can the council find the documentation and clarify this? Because it's currently well used for leisure, including dog walking and exercise. And in fact, we have many football teams coming to the site, training children of different ages. And having spoken to those people who come to use the field on a regular basis, we have been told that they have a formal agreement with the council to use it for that purpose. So that's another question that we'd like answered on the Bryce Road Field. At previous community meetings, a lot of the residents were advised by the leader of the council that transport is the single biggest issue to protest on, as developers are unlikely to want to invest in this kind of infrastructure. So surely that means that the developer would also be reluctant to invest in alternate entrances and exit to the site at Bryce Road, because at this moment in time there's only one access to and from that site. The road is a cul-de-sac. So as a resident of that street, I'm quite concerned about that. So on these grounds alone, shouldn't the site be withdrawn from the plan if there's no assurance that developers would be looking to increase the road infrastructure around the site? So another question that residents have raised of Bryce Road is, have there been planning applications to this site before? And if so, what was the outcome and reason for the rejection or withdrawal of any application? And also a final point, that the RAG stated that this particular site is a very poor connection to any cycle routes. In fact, there's no access to cycle routes, so walking is the only alternative for exercise for the residents around that site. The area is used as a park and it's flat enough for people with mobility issues to use. Quite frequently we do have residents who do not live in Bryce Road visit the site in cars, and they actually park on the entrance to the field and use the field, and they're actually coming from different areas. So, and another thing that we mentioned John Corbett site earlier, the John Corbett Meadow. We'd like to know if at all possible if these sites can be protected forever, and what steps can we take and what do we need to look into to protect our green spaces? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You might need to remind, there's quite a lot of questions there.
I was thinking the same thing. If I miss anything, please let me know. Yeah, just start from the first. The RAG rating form does say no known biodiversity. Now, that may just be because it's not formally designated as a sink or a slink, for example. I think, echoing the Chair's comments before, if you've got any evidence of biodiversity that we need to take account of, that should certainly be in the comments forms that you submit. The other point in terms of the tree survey, those of you who've gone through these forms will recognise there's lots of instances where we say there's additional surveys needed. That's just because at this stage it's very much a general overview of the site. We would expect that if this goes forward in the process that further research would have to be done on some of the elements in this assessment. And certainly a point that I think we need to make is that no development on any of these sites will come forward without a formal planning application in due course. And again, that's just the point to make, that it might be that we require that tree survey to be done as part of that planning application process. There was a comment around the accesses. I think it was in terms of developers' commitment to doing work. So obviously, if we went through that full process and an application was approved, there would be a requirement to undertake any necessary or pay towards any necessary works to enable that scheme to come forward. So again, at this stage, that's too early to address, bearing in mind this is just a draft plan. There was a question around planning applications. I don't know off the top of my head if there's been any planning applications. I was trying to look, but it might take me a little bit of time. I'm more than happy to come back directly to the lady if she'd like to leave her contact details, or via a ward councillor with that information. How do they protect the site? I'm not sure how they protect the site.
Well, I think it's very important that you respond through the consultation process with your concerns, and then they'll be considered in the round with all the rest of the consultation responses. So if you wish to have it protected, that needs to be your consultation response.
Okay. Did that cover all the questions, Mrs. Westwood? Yep, you're happy with that. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for coming. Next on the list, sorry.
Just a question. I mean, if the lady is being asked to provide information on biodiversity, I mean, it kind of begs the question in terms of the report which is supporting this plan. How detailed was that, and how was that done? You know, I mean, if this is an example of one site where, you know, the office is saying, can you submit the evidence, which I'm sure the lady will. But what about other sites? I mean, doesn't that kind of put a question mark on the assessment?
Yeah, it could well, Carl, can you?
Yeah, I'd just make the point that obviously we've assessed literally hundreds and hundreds of sites throughout this plan. It's impossible to do a drill down on every site to the level that you'd need, for example, for a planning application. We've used all of our records and all of the information available to come to the assessment recommendation and balance. But all I'm saying, if there is additional information we're not aware of, then residents should put it in. I'm not asking them to provide evidence that we have overlooked. We've used the information we have to hand, but we're obviously conscious of the fact that evidence in lots of these categories might be unavailable to us. And if it is, then we'd like to hear about it and we'd take into consideration.
If a small parcel of land came through the process and then was found to have something, when you go into more detail on the planning application, could that stop the planning application and then essentially save that piece of land?
Well, effectively, yeah, we'd have to, any information based on what it is would have to be decided whether or not it was disqualifying in itself or whether mitigation could overcome that issue. So it's a case of understanding what it is, the extent of it, and how big a deal that is. But yes, potentially there might be other things that come forward through further assessment, either from residents' comments or our further work for the next stage of the plan, that does mean sites come out because of those technical reasons, yes.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that if it slips through the net now, it should be caught in the next layer down. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, it will only be caught though if there's a planning application, is that right? Or is there going to be any detailed assessment before any planning application came in? Or is it when the planning application comes in, so that site is sold, the planning application comes in, and these issues are explored in more detail and found, for example, it's found that there is endangered species on a site. Is it at that point then that the site is safe? What's the process? Is it only at that point then, at the point of an application and sale, after sale?
It depends very much on what the issue is and the extent of the issue. We are going to be doing further work between now and the next stage of the publication plan, though, on all the sites that are being considered. So it might be that we find information out then that means that we don't recommend it goes into the publication plan. It's difficult to know without knowing what the exact details.
So would you be able to make a commitment to residents that are raised in their responses that they are concerned that there may be issues that need further exploration that aren't covered in the RAG? Would you be able to make a commitment to investigate those sites before any recommendation is made that they are sold?
Well, part of the process in terms of the consultation exercise that we will respond to all the comments that we receive. So we will have to, a little bit like you said we did, we will be responsible for responding to those comments. Have we taken them into account? If so, what have we done? So part of the exercise, I think we could certainly look at things that are brought to our attention and doing further research on them. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Next question. We've done half an hour, but we've got 3 more on my list in front of me, so I'm happy to let them speak. We've got Jan Norton.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Jan Norton. I'm a resident of Kings Winford and have been for 30 odd years. I've just got 5 points to make. They're not necessarily questions, but they're the things that are bubbling in my head at the moment, just having heard what I've heard. I've also read the Black Country Plan. I echo what Showkat raised around getting some data refreshed, and I would suggest it was holistic and included the birth rate and the death rate. We are seeing a reducing birth rate and an increasing death rate nationally. I don't know what the local figures are. In terms of the consultation process, my background is in working across agencies on public health issues, and it seems to me that there's been a word missing, which is meaningful. I think there's been a heavy reliance on IT with this process, a minimal dialogue, and that gap has actually been filled by community organisations. And I wonder why there wasn't a very different approach that looked more geographically, that engaged more locally in communities from the start. Generally, people are bothered about their locus of engagement, and there would always be a backup website for people looking more widely. This process was set up mid-August. The time frame was very tight. At that point, there weren't drop-ins set in place, and that's what we used to call a quick and dirty consultation. Point 3, once the green belt is eroded, will we lose more along the A449 corridor? That's my biggest concern about starting to dig up the green belt, as well as the environmental issues, which I know lots of people have covered. Question 4 is about, the fact that the focus from a Kings Winford resident's point of view seems to have been very heavily on Holbeach and the Triangle, and that in general there hasn't been a shared or equivalent focus on small areas of greenfield site in areas of the borough that I'm familiar with. And point 5, I'd like to say thank you very much to the officers for their time and responsiveness. I have been asking questions. The responses have been timely and informative. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for those points. You raised South Staffordshire, and obviously my ward is Kings Winford North and Woolheath, so I'm very aware of South Staffordshire. They have announced their preferred sites, their options at the moment, and it does not include anything on our borders. But what that shows is that what the Friends of Ridge Hill Woods have done, you know, those community groups, have gone out, got the consultation responses in. The South Staffs have listened and they have taken those sites out. So it just shows by getting these responses in and by building a good campaign, you know, we can take on the developers and hopefully get these sites removed. But thank you for your remarks. Anybody want to come back on anything from that?
I'd like to thank the Speaker for coming from Kings Winford, where there is a huge area of concern about the housing development and associated developments, for speaking up for the small spaces. And that was, you know, we come back to this theme again and again, that the small spaces, which in total will have quite a big impact on overall loss of green spaces and the facilities thereon for the ordinary people. We just haven't been able to, it seems, be able to reach them. And my worry is that because we haven't been able to reach them, and the numbers of 99 for the drops in sessions that we had, and I know from fact that in Brierley Hill and associate area, there were very few people who came to or could come to the drop-in session, and one of the reasons was a lot of people affected in that immediate vicinity where they have a green space under threat, as it were, didn't even know about it. So I think I plead through you, Chair, that just because the representatives from small areas are not here, that we don't overlook them. And I thank the lady for actually highlighting their plight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I did mention at the last scrutiny meeting that we've got a role to play as well as local councillors. You know, we know our wards, we know how to get to people that are difficult to reach, and you know, we need to take the baton. We've certainly done it in Kings Winford, North and Wall Heath, and through the work we've done with the local campaign groups, Wall Heath is one, and the Friends of Ridge Hill, that's had a knock-on effect to the smaller sites as well, because they've been able to, you know, jump on the back of those big campaigns. So when you've got 4,500 people on the Friends of Ridge Hill, you know, the people from Kings Winford South have been able to, you know, get involved and put their sites on, which has then, you know, had a domino effect. But it's down to us as well as ward councillors to get to you know, our residents and try and make them aware as much as we can as well. Obviously the council have to do it.
Thank you,
but
Chair.
We've got a job as well.
I don't wish to blow my own trumpet. I've done my part. I'm just making the point beyond Brierley Hill as well, just as that lady has done it beyond Kings Winford. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank Jan Norton for her comments, and and she's actually given me a quote that I think we should remember for always, and that is that this consultation exercise has been characterised by, quote, a heavy reliance on IT and minimal dialogue with the gap filled by community organisations. I don't think that's a very good place for the council to be. We have to remember that the council is funded by citizens. It shouldn't come to a point where the citizens have to organise against its own council because of the decisions it makes and the proposals it comes up with. I think there's a learning from here. I think it's very good that community groups have developed on the back of this. I think that's a good point, but it shouldn't have been this way, in my view. Had consultation and engagement happened earlier on, sitting down with people round the table to talk to them about what they wanted, I don't think we would be in a place now where there has been so much controversy and so much angst amongst councillors and amongst officers and the public about this whole exercise.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Previous lady mentioned meaningful engagement, and we also heard Carl and other people saying about you say and we did. That brings me back to the point that Malcolm Chilton brought earlier on regarding the projection figures and the fact that, we said that there's a piece of work that's been Showkat requested that was going to be too big. Now, if this is going to be a meaningful engagement, then I don't think we should be looking at how big that piece of work will be, because this piece of work that we're engaging now is also a very big piece of work. And whilst we're doing this major piece of work, lots of our residents are going through, I can imagine what they're going through, some of those people. And that's the reason why they're here. They're under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and obviously they don't want to see what is being presented in the plan so far. Now, that being the case, and also my view is that if the projection figures are incorrect, and there isn't a requirement for having the amount of housing that's being demanded, then we need to put that pressure through our local MPs and our leaders to say, look, on what basis are you doing this? This is unfair. And if we are going to be having that quote, you say we did and will do, then let's do it properly. We got it the wrong way around. Our figures are wrong, and therefore we're demanding the wrong amount, and that is not acceptable, and we need to get it the right way around. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think my point about public health is obviously they're under an immense pressure at the moment, obviously with COVID-19. That is by no means over yet, and we're heading into the winter. So it was just in regards to the pressures on the department. But, I do take the point on board, and I'm fighting this. My ward is taking a big hit in this draft plan, so I'm fully aware of what's at stake. Councillor Foster.
Chair, I wonder, can we formulate a formal proposal that we ask, or through whatever means, public health is requested or instructed to do this work? And if they haven't got the capacity to procure somebody to do that work for them, it really is emerging as a key part of this exercise. It's setting the tone and setting the standard for all of the, the criteria and the demand and everything and all of the work that follows from it. Can we make, as a committee, a formal recommendation that this work is carried out?
Yeah, if it helps to save the sites in my ward, then and everybody else's, then yeah, I think we should we can do that. So yeah, happy to do that. Take it as a recommendation. Anybody else want to comment on Mrs. Norton's comments? No.
Chair, if I can just make a comment generally, it's important to save the green belt as well as green spaces. And I think, the examples, the last couple of speakers have highlighted that. There are cities and areas who, after COVID, are looking at, working up 20-minute neighbourhoods and 15-minute neighbourhoods and all of that. And within that, all of these open spaces, green spaces, become really important. And I'm sure as we go along through the scrutiny process, that we will be able to focus on the benefits as well. And obviously when we go into detail, and if public health can come up with the figures, then that will kind of put a different light. But I think it is important that we drill down and not forget the smaller spaces and the important role they play, and what they mean to local communities and local people.
Yeah, well, certainly these figures could have a massive impact, and we're projecting so far in advance, but it might impact even further on in advance, hadn't it? So it might save stuff even further in the future. So, yeah, we'll request that data because it's all evidence for our cases. Simon Daniel is next.
Hello, I'm a resident of Kings Winford as well. I've lived there for 30 years. My question is really about the process. A lot of us find the whole process rather opaque. It's almost as though the plan has arrived from nowhere and no one wants to take responsibility for it. presumably it's a council plan, albeit devised with 3 other Black Country boroughs. And yet it's hard to find anyone who's making any arguments in its favour. And I find that confusing. And I'd like to also ask what happens next? What's the next stage after the consultation process? Who makes the final decision as to whether the plan is enacted or not? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all agree that we need more houses. I think this is about where we put those houses and how we utilise some of the land that we've got. I'm looking for somebody to answer. Carl, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the next stage, once we've finished with the consultation, we will obviously collate all the comments. We will look to do a formal response to those comments in due course, and that will be published. Between now and next year, when the publication stage of the plan is required to be produced, we'll be doing further work and gathering further evidence, and also taking on board the comments of residents and obviously any other interested parties. It will mean that the next stage is a publication stage. That will have to go through the cabinet approvals of all the 4 Black Country authorities, and if approval is granted by all 4 cabinets, it will go to a public consultation exercise again to follow that before it moves on to a final submission stage. We expect to be around 2023 with the adoption in 2024. I think that answers that question. In terms of the plan and where it's come from, obviously we've done a Black Country core strategy which was adopted in 2011. We've been working on the review of this since 2016. There's a requirement to review your plans every 5 years. So I think the reason this is kind of seems to come out of the blue is that obviously it's the first time that we've had to allocate sites in the plan. The previous plan was mostly policy based. This has still got lots of policies in, but they seem to be obviously taking a backseat, shall I say, to the sites, which is understandable. But the policies are equally as important in the plan, and we would urge people to comment on those as well. Thanks.
Yeah, Kathy and just this is the public, so if we can keep our sort of input as short as possible, if you just quick points.
Yeah, it will be very, very short, but I think what might help our understanding, or the public's understanding of the process, is if officers can explain what weighting system they will use for objections versus comments or support from larger companies, developers, organisations who may also be responding on it. So is there a weighting system as part of the consultation process that will help inform your decision making as to what appears in the plan next time and what's removed from it? So I suppose the bottom line is a resident's opinion, a resident's comment, going to be given equal weighting to that of, I don't know, a developer who's expressing an interest in the site?
Absolutely, on that point, it's really about the material planning reasons. That's the real key. Obviously, we want to know why people are objecting and what their reason is. We will give equal weight to that reason as opposed from a developer or a landowner. Obviously, it's difficult to say what's the weighting system. There's so many moving factors. It depends very much on what the issue is. And as we found through the exercise of the first tranche of filtering, sites can be disqualified for one particular reason. So one very good reason why a site can't be delivered, or then that could disqualify it in its own right. In that case, some issues have more weight than others. In fact, through the RAG rating, we've got what we call gateway constraints. So there are issues that are so fundamental that we would not take a site forward if those alone aren't met. In terms of the other factors, weighting will be different on each site depending on what the issue is and how important it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, we should appreciate there's only 5 days left till the consultation ends. With the best will in the world, I don't think we're going to get through all of the questions, certainly that my group want to ask this evening, particularly as we're giving maximum time to the public this evening. Can I ask Carl, with this process ongoing, the scrutiny process ongoing beyond the closing date for formal responses from the public, how any matters arising from these sessions will be incorporated into the consultation process?
or the decision-making process, rather.
Yeah, through you, Chair. In terms of the consultation period, obviously we have to be strong on that ending at 5 o'clock on the 11th, but any additional information that we get, either from various parties or that we find out ourselves over these next few months, will be taken into account when we make recommendations to members going forward.
Thank you. Okay, next, last one that's written on my list, Stephen Haycock.
No, it's not a speech. My name's Stephen Haycock. I live in King Swinford, chair committee. I know this is a bit late in the day, but I really want to go back to the communications issue. Accompanying the summary document for the Black Country Plan as it applies to Dudley and housing, there's a rather nice colour picture, a colour map. On closer inspection, and you'd have to be really close, I find that it's quite a fuzzy reproduction of the map of the Dudley Borough. I've been down to the library to see the more large-scale version of it, and whereas this is just a small fuzzy map, the one in the library is a large fuzzy map, and there's not really much clarity as regards the boundary. Now, I said I lived in Kingsmith, I live in Ash Crescent, and I'm really concerned about the proposal, which is DUH 221, which is the green space behind Standhills Road, if you know the area. And the proposal is to tack on DU 221 to DUH 203, which is the Ketley Quarry development. I find there's very little, if you really look at the map, there's very little clarity regarding the boundary and exactly how much green space is actually going to be swallowed up by this proposal. You've got it described as rear of Standhills, but it doesn't actually show as to whether it goes right to the edge of Ash Crescent, or rather the back of Ash Crescent. And I think combined, the two sites are quite unique. You've got the green field at the top end, if you like, and you've got a kind of wildwood area that's gone back to nature at the bottom end. No real clarity as to which part of it is, or if it's combined in the actual proposal. Now that feeds into my next set of questions or observations, is that I was after examining the map, I was quite concerned about this development and the loss of the green space. And I sort of got involved with various groups who put together a petition which is defending the green spaces and the green belt. And as I was going around the area of Ash Crescent, Standhills, that particular zone, I found that there was quite a few people that were, even despite the many communication channels which have been produced, hadn't got a clue about the Black Country Plan or any of the implications that followed it. And I'd like to know, and I was quite pleased to get in my letterbox that A5 leaflet, just alerting me to the plan. But I'd like to know why it was only issued about a week ago. Why wasn't the leaflet, the flyer, delivered much sooner to all the residents in that particular area? And finally, or near enough finally, you refer to the online, the ability to go online and submit your comments and views on the proposals and the consultation process. Luckily enough, I had the paper version and I read it through before I went online. And I noticed that right at the end, it did actually request an electronic signature. I don't know, I mean, I know if you're computer literate and all that kind of stuff, you'd probably have an electronic signature in your file somewhere. But for people like myself, I mean, it was a bit of a stumbling block. But don't worry. I did actually submit the written version, and I've actually produced an essay for the pleasure of the people that actually inspect these or read these consultations. And I have made a very, very serious point about the importance of green spaces in urban areas, like the rear of Standhills, the back of Ash Crescent, the Ashbank area, which is known as the Green Field. And I think somebody's already made the point about the importance of green spaces for people's mental health, physical health and general well-being. That particular area of King Swinford is an oasis of tranquility, and it should be defended by our councillors and the residents and the council combined. Thanks ever so much for listening. Cheers.
Thank you. Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point on the map. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. Obviously, online you can zoom in and look at the details and, very clearly, but what we are more than happy to do is send you a copy of the plan if you want to provide me with your details before you leave, and we can get that out to you. In terms of electronic signature, I understand you can just type your name into that particular area, and I think it says so on the form, but it doesn't need to be a signature, it's, you know, a PDF, for example, but that's my understanding of it. Thank you.
Okay. I think we've touched on the points of the A5 leaflet earlier and how it was in response to something that happened at Scrutiny. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I've had a communication from Kat Eccles, who you called up first, and she's suffered the loss of a friend today, and that's why she's not attended. But she has sent me a question, and if you wish to allow it, I can read it.
Can we just finish the gentleman's
point? Yeah, sorry. Before you move on.
I don't know if there was anybody else that wanted to come in on it at all, but you've raised some good points. Okay. Sorry. Yep. So we've reached the end of my list here. We've been going for an hour. Is there anybody else that does wish to speak? I've got 3 hands up. Okay. Let's do these 3, and then we'll leave the public forum. So, and then we'll just have Kat's point at the end, if that's all right. Okay. So, if you want to come up to the microphone and introduce yourself, if you can, try and keep it as brief as possible.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Steve Hunter. I live in Green Meadow, which is opposite the development that's planned at Worcester Lane, which is plot F in the plan. Talking about the marketing communication, we're right on the very periphery of the borough. And I think the problem with the whole process in terms of communication is that any development in that location will have a dramatic effect on the local village, which is Hagley, which is in the Bromsgrove borough. And my basic question is, that's going to have a dramatic effect on the whole locality. And why is it not the fact that when a development is so close to the perimeter of the borough, that consultation doesn't extend into the residents who will be dramatically affected by it actually in the Bromsgrove borough? There's no knowledge, to my knowledge, that people in the Hagley area are aware of the impact it will have on them. And to me, it just seems a basic flaw in the whole communication process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to pick that point up? I think it's difficult for us to comment as it's obviously not in our borough.
Thank you, Chair. I think you made the point. Obviously, we have to be responsible to our residents, and there's a limit to how far we can go. So, the residents within our borough obviously are our priority.
Is Bromsgrove going through the process as well? Or?
Yeah, but sorry, I should make the point. But obviously, they're entitled to make comment on it anyway. And Bromsgrove Council themselves will comment on the plan on behalf of their residents.
Thank you. We've got another question. The lady with your hand up there, if you want to come to the mic.
Hello, my name's Narinda, and I've been living in Pedmore for the last 20 years. Just following on what was said over there is, even though Hagley comes in the Bromsgrove borough, any new housing development on the Greenbelt site on Worcester Lane will have a very big impact on resources like the doctor's surgery, schools. Being a working family for the last 20 years, living in Pedmore, when you live in the Dudley borough and you're having to send one child to a Dudley school and another child not walking distance to a school in the Bromsgrove borough. So even these projection figures that we've hit on population and everything, and the engagement, really, I know both boroughs are overlapping, but as a Dudley resident, so yeah, this is a draft plan, this is a consultation, but why hasn't the neighbouring village, Hagley, been made aware and left? And also, the council, you mentioned about how much money is being spent on the buzz advertisements. When aren't the council going to learn from their processes and procedures and how they spend the money wisely? And I'm saying that because I work for the council, Birmingham Council, not Dudley. And the reason I work for Birmingham Council, because it's easier to get to the train station by car, but only at the moment, whilst there isn't these additional houses. You know, there's alternative routes. Because so, you know, on behalf of working families that have worked very hard trying to get an education for the children. When you're working very hard, education and everything else, then you look at the public health. Even before COVID, NHS haven't had the funding for their areas, doctor surgeries, etc. So living for the last 20 years in Pedmore, Stourbridge, you're forced to travel further to get an appointment. And that's for even people living in the area who haven't got their own transport, elderly residents who rely on other people to come and collect them. So I think we're missing a lot, even though this is the draft plan and consultation process, but there's some things that haven't really seriously, properly been looked into. And as a council, Dudley Council, any council, you have got the resources, you have got the money, it just needs to be managed well. So it's very well having things in writing and certain protocols to follow, but there is, and I'm saying that I am still working in the council as well and seeing it from that end as well. I think certain areas, everyone's been very casual about important issues that need. So where is the representation from, like figures, projection figures about what development on extending schools in the area? Because currently in Pedmore, there's only one small primary school, and there's no scope around that school for an extension.
Okay, can we let maybe the officers come back on a couple of those points? We have got somebody from education here, school places.
Yeah, I think you're right, there's people in the room who might be able to answer that. My only point on Bromsgrove would be to repeat that the Bromsgrove are well aware of the proposals. We've spoken to officers there, and I'm aware that we also presented to members in Hagley some time ago about the plan, so they're aware of it. In terms of the other points, I think, yeah, we might have to get further comments.
Hi, it's Richard Sadlier from Education. In terms of the size of the development, with the yield of pupils, we'd imagine that would yield 32 primary age pupils and 17 secondary age pupils, which when you split it by year groups is 5 per year group and 3 per year group, so it's a relatively small effect. The births are dipping at the moment, so at primary there is going to be spare capacity emerging, but compared to the whole size of the system, 5 per year and 3 per year is relatively small and can be absorbed. If numbers do pick up over the course of the plan, then there potentially could be expansions to schools to absorb that. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can we get another question in? There's another member of the public. The guy with the stripy top.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wayne Round. I've been a resident at Severn Drive for over 33 years. If the proposal to build all these houses that are in the Black Country Plan go ahead, I want to know what plans that the council has got in store for the infrastructure in the roads in and around the said areas. The other thing is, with all these houses being built, or proposed houses being built, the access and egress off Severn Drive onto Corbyn's Hall and then onto High Oak is already bad enough. People trying to get in and out, but with extra traffic from all the houses that are being proposed, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. So we need answers to that. The other question which I've got is on Severn Drive. We believe the green was once designated as a play area. We want to know where the documentation is that was agreed, and when did the designation change? Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking.
Hello there. In terms of the transport impacts, all of the sites that have been identified in the draft plan have gone forward along with, I say, all the other authority sites. And what we've done is we've commissioned a piece of work which actually models the transport network to look at the impacts of all these developments. So the process is in 3 stages. So effectively we look at what the network is doing now with the results of all the development we have now and all the committed developments we have. We then validate that to check that everything as we expect and to what we see on street now. We then build that up to a next layer where we then actually load all of the new developments in the plan, and then we then look at the impacts that has. We look at the impacts and the comments that have been made in the consultations. And as Carl mentioned previously, it may well be that some sites could be deemed as, you know, the impact is too severe, or there may be a wider mitigation that's required. Again, that then could be used as evidence to bid for further capital, which may possibly bring that site forward at a later date or completely rule it out. There's then the option, once we've taken that, once we've sort of looked at that second case, to then go forward to the third case, which is all the mitigations in place, and again to see what that does to the network. And hopefully at the end of that we then produce a report based on, so everybody can see what the transport impacts of the results of the plan are. It looks at different years, so we're looking at now, and it runs through to 2039. So there's quite a lot of growth we can look at in that time, and we can robust test the network so that residents, businesses, etc., can have confidence in the results for the medium to long term. Any other questions on that?
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to draw a line there. Yeah. You have spoken once, so I've got a gentleman at the back here that wants to speak, so I'm going to let him speak, and then I think we'll draw it to close. We've been going for well over the 30 minutes now, and we have got other items.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this as short as I can. My name's Tim Williams. I live in Warleith. One of the questions about costings from earlier on, I asked at the previous meeting around costs of how much the website would cost and everything that involved, because it has been quite well published how poor everybody thinks it is, and I haven't had a response back. So I understand that you've said from the slide you showed that there was £51,000 spent or thereabouts. The gentleman, I think, mentioned that they couldn't do a full postal letter out to everyone because it would have been too much above the budget. Could somebody answer me and tell me how much that figure would have been? And therefore, can I get the figure of how much the website has actually cost? And if it is an ongoing cost, so every change that the company that you are utilising to do that website, what's the costs for that? So that's my first part out the way. The second one, I've been given a number of questions to ask, but I'm only going to ask 2, if I may. One is Andy Street is constantly updating to say that more funding is becoming available to regenerate the brownfield sites. Even Boris is quoted as saying plans will focus on brownfield sites, and today Andy Street has mentioned that there's a further £33 million available. Therefore, what is Dudley doing to secure some of this funding to save our green belt? And also, if you were to use just the brownfield sites that are showing as unviable in the Black Country Plan, this has the potential to deliver 3 times the homes planned for the whole beach and the triangle sites. Can I say these are questions I've been given, so if some of the details are slightly wrong, I'm just repeating what I've been asked. So that's the first part. And the second part is, I hear there's a number of targets being bandied around, particularly the 76,000 homes you have to achieve. You also have to meet a net carbon zero target by 2050. How do you aim to achieve this when you're concreting over the green spaces? And also, how do you aim to achieve this by overstressing an infrastructure which is already at breaking point? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Carl.
Yeah, I didn't hear all the questions. I'm trying to get the answer to the first one, so if I missed anything, someone might be able to help me out. But the cost of the website, obviously the Dudley website is managed by us. We run it, and it doesn't cost us anything other than our time and resources. The JDI website is one that the 4 Black Country authorities contribute towards, and I haven't got that figure in front of me, but again, I'm more than happy to try and find that out and provide that information to members following the meeting. The other point that I just heard was about the viability, and I've seen this mentioned before. So there's a figure of 2,500 or 2,600 homes that are potentially unviable. We do think they're potentially unviable at the stage, but obviously viability is done at a point in time. Those sites, by and large, I think 2,450 of those potential dwellings are still included in our supply. So whilst we recognise they're unviable at present, we haven't discounted them, we are including them in the supply. And therefore, the reference to the Greenbelt numbers is largely irrelevant because they're already accounted for. And again, I go back to the point that even if they weren't included, it's not just a case of swapping out Greenbelt for Brownfield, it's the target we have to achieve. It's a really important point there. The only dwellings in that 2,600 figure that aren't included is a Greenbelt site, which is the Gornal Sewage Works, which hasn't been included for both viability and deliverability issues.
Okay, thank you. Phil?
Chair, yeah, just to confirm, we'll come back with a formal response in terms of the cost for a full Black Country-wide letter drop, as requested.
Okay, if you send that to the committee, I know Tim who asked a question, so I can get that answer to him as well. Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, there were some follow-up questions I'd got to responses that officers gave to speakers, if I can...
Would they wait for the next item on the agenda? Can we just hear from Chris? He's got one of the speakers earlier. I said that you could make a point quickly. Yeah.
Yes, I'll wait.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So it's a question from Kat Eccles. I know she's a resident in Wollaston. The questions are regarding Wollaston farm grazing fields. There's 2 questions. One of them is directed actually towards Councillor Harley, so he can ask if he wishes, answer if he wishes, obviously, and the others to communications. So she tells me that Councillor Harley asserted on Black Country Radio that Wollaston farm grazing fields were safe, and she wants to know how he can make this assertion ahead of the publication of the consultation. And she feels that considerably more resources in terms of comment sheets and meetings, availability of meetings, have been made available to Kings Winford and Warheath, and Stourbridge has been left struggling. May I just ask communications to comment on that? Okay, thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Harley, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, that's not the conversation I had on Black Country Radio. Councillor Foster was on there informing the Councillor Davis on the show. I believe that
comments?
What I would say is that with the community groups we've seen, and there's some really good comments and questions that we've seen here tonight, that is all part of the consultation process. This is a draft document, which means if we get our facts right and we have a justified evidence, then that draft document can change. And you're all playing a part. I think we can try to do that. So keep it going on with the work that the council's doing in the barn doors. We like see at the back. There's a lot of good work in the here. Just keep it going. So yeah, sites can be saved, but we have to have a justification for doing so, and that justification has to withstand scrutiny and the inspectorate at Bristol. And if we can justify our decisions as I have done, and if we withstand that scrutiny of the inspectorate, then yes, sites can be saved. But we're all way from that yet, and we've got you carry on doing what you're doing, commenting, probably sending information and data to the officer team. Hopefully, we'll have the desired outcome that we want.
Okay, thank you.
It's important that the ones who have to make ultimately the decision on inside the cabinet, like Councillor Phillips, you don't predetermine the outcome, because it would be easy for me to play politics tonight and say, and all that would happen is, as some politicians do, say, all that would do is provide the copies as a developers, lawyers. There is a process to go through, and it has to be done correctly. And if we don't, then some development will need copies. And a very smart lawyer will be arguing today. So this decision cannot be based purely on politics, because not being re-appropriate by 6,000 residents in Wally and King's Winford. It has to be based on facts, and facts that stand up to scrutiny when it goes to the inspectors, and ultimately to the relevant Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Phil, Carl, who wants to go first?
I can certainly start in terms of the comments form question that was there. I think this is part of that piece from the previous scrutiny, where in addition to comments forms that were distributed across the borough to locations such as Stourbridge, Kings Winford and all across, following that scrutiny there was an additional 27,000 printed as we outlined earlier, and obviously some of those, as I said in the presentation, were actually on request through elected members and through members of the community in different parts of the borough. So geographically some will have gone, but they will have gone on request to specific areas, but it's certainly with that 27,000 as well gone to pick up points across the borough. Thank you.
Okay. Carl, did you want to come in? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think Phil might have covered this in the presentation. I apologise if I missed it. When we first looked at our potential communication strategy, we were in the midst of a COVID epidemic, and we still are, but we weren't sure at that point what we'd be able to do in terms of face-to-face public meetings. That's why the drop-in sessions were arranged later in the day. And in terms of the meetings in different areas, Stourbridge included, they've been arranged by members and groups, and I've responded to every one of those requests to attend. So I believe I haven't rejected any of those attendances, and one of them is tomorrow night in Stourbridge, so I hope that we've covered everywhere that needed to be covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Can I ask my questions that were in of officers that were in that were made on responses that were made to the speakers? Is that all right? Because we didn't get the chance to the last three speakers to question officers based on their responses.
Right. If we keep those for the councillor contact, then I think that would be better. I just want to try and...
What sorry, leave it to what?
Sorry, leave it for the next item where the councillors can ask questions. I think if you want to make a point, that's fine, but I don't want questions.
Yeah, Chair, on that point, in terms of attention for Kingsway for North of Warleaf, really goes down to the amazing work done by Warleaf as one and Friends of Ridgeo. So it's nothing that the council have just decided to focus on Kingsway for North of Warleaf. It's because of the activists that have worked around those areas.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
evening, Stourbridge Town Hall is in the foyer. It's been advertised as being in the Wollaston room, but there's another function already happening in that room. So it is taking place tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, and it's in the foyer of the Town Hall itself. Yes, there's a 2-hour limit, I think, on the Tesco's car park.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for the questions. We've gone way over the 30 minutes, but it's obviously it's an opportunity for the public to come and another opportunity for the public to come and ask those questions. So thank you very much. So we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the councillor's chance now to ask questions. Councillor Salim, if you want to go first.
Thank you, Chair. First, I just want to say thank you to all our residents. There's some very important questions that they've asked, which I will touch upon in the selected questions I'd like to ask. First of all, I'd like to ask our leader some questions. Is that possible?
Just got to the loo. Just got to the toilet. It's got to. Have you got another question to ask?
Good timing. I'll ask the officers first, if that's possible.
Oh, he's back.
Can I just say, Chair, that I've been indicating before, and you'd said that I could come into this session, but you've allowed Councillor Salim first, but that's okay.
Yeah, you just caught my eye. I'm trying to look around everywhere.
Please.
You'll be able to ask your questions, don't worry.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask the leaders some questions first. There's been 2 public meetings in my ward of Kings Winford North and Warleaf. And the leader was present at one of the meetings at the DK Rugby Club. And he saw firsthand how passionate our residents are to protect the Greenbelt. I'd like to ask, and a lot of residents are asking me this question, is why do we have the 2 Greenbelt sites included as part of the Black Country Plan?
Seems weird talking to the public when we've got to have our backs to them. In a nutshell, this is a process we have to go through, a consultation process, but it's also a means to try and, if we get it right, to protect sites from future development. So if you look at, say, for instance, the meadow in Amblecote, Corbett's Meadow, it's a cracking example of how this process works. Now, if the consultation process goes the way, certainly the ward councillors and residents would like, particularly in Kingswigford North and Moor Heath, and one of those sites borders my ward too, so it affects the Kingswig neighbouring borough ward of Kingswigford South. If it goes the right way, and you've only got to look at the development in and around Wall Heath, Kingswigford. Lots of new houses being built. Although they come under Brockmore and Pensnet, they've got Kingswigford postcodes, and they'll be using Kingswigford schools, roads, GP surgeries, and all the other issues that we've heard tonight. So to put another 2 large developments in one ward or over 2 wards, I believe myself is wrong, but that's a personal view from me. That shouldn't stop my decision-making process at a later stage. But in a nutshell, your question, that there's a process to go through. And if we do it correctly, I believe some of these sites, particularly the big Greenbelt sites, can be protected from future development.
Thank you. One final question for you, Leader. Recently it was brought to my attention by concerned residents of a construction company that you are a named director. Could you shed some light on this?
Well, I really shouldn't because it's a personal matter, but I will, because some people who I won't name here tonight have tried to make political capital out of that, and it has nothing to do with what we're discussing tonight. I have 2 sons who, want of a better phrase, are tarmackers, and they've just set up their own business using the Bank of Dad, which I'm sure some of the residents will understand what the Bank of Dad is. And I've set the company up on Company's House for them, as I've done that before. But the code, that's the only code you can use, and all they do is driveways and a few potholes, but they mainly do driveways. If they were constructing motorways, then, and I was a shareholder in that, I can assure you, Chair, I would not be standing here tonight. I'd be on an island in the Caribbean somewhere, I can assure you. But no, it's small-time driveways, etc. And I've got if anybody is really nosy and wants to look, I've got a 20% stake, which I won't have once they repay me what they owe.
Thank you, Leader.
Is that okay? Thank
Chair,
you.
it's free publicity for the leader.
Well, I would like to thank the Labour Party for the publicity. So if anybody wants a driveway done, I'm sure you can find them on Checker Trader. Thank you.
I'd like to ask some questions for the officers now, please. Touching on what the residents mentioned about the projections. Now, the review of population estimates and projections produced by the Office of National Statistics in May 2021 has found an overinflation for local data in Coventry. They also identify Sandville as the town that could follow a similar pattern. What specific work is being done at a local level to look at this key data?
I think we're talking about figures, aren't we?
Yeah.
Population figures again, which we've touched on.
But this is really about Sandville now, which is, but they're identifying Sandville as having an overinflation.
I think it comes back to the point that Councillor Lawrence made earlier about a piece of work, and I know there's a recommendation tonight. We'd have to consider that as part of that exercise if that was done. Thank you.
Will need to be updated on that, please. And how will the council protect the residents from the range of pollution issues that will arise from such a massively concentrated building plan in the area of Kings Winford North and Warleaf?
Someone's come into the microphone.
Yeah, on the, I suppose the pollution question, there are a range of policies in the plan. We have got a specific policy on air quality, if that's what you're referring to, which will seek mitigation measures for development. We've currently got an air quality policy in the existing core strategy, and that looks at, ensuring that developments are not exacerbating or protecting residents, from pollution. Looks at ventilation as well. Obviously, there's a lot of detail on site specifics about ventilation, mechanical ventilation of in buildings, and also looking around promoting electric vehicles, use of electric vehicle charging points being installed in developments as well. So obviously looking at greener methods of transportation and improving cycling and walking as well as part of any development. So overall, lots of measures to improve, and protect residents as we move forward.
Thank you. Is Councillor Zada here? I'd like to ask him some questions as well, please.
Councillor Zada still here, or?
Chair,
No.
can I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of people you're asking questions, were they informed and invited to be here to be asked the questions? I mean, certainly, you've asked Councillor Harley some questions.
Yeah,
No, we
everybody was
didn't even
invited.
know whether he was going to be here or not. So that, he would be formally called in at some stage, and then we would ask him the questions.
We
We
invited him, and he's answering questions as.
Oh, you
as
advised
all
him?
the
But at least you should have the courtesy to let us know.
So
who's
is
gonna be here.
Councillor Zada here or not?
So in his absence.
Okay.
Yeah, was he invited?
We can't.
Well, he was here, which is why I wanted to ask him. These are questions that residents have sent me in the last hour or so, and they're quite concerned. So I'd like to, Councillor Foster mentioned that he was here, which is why obviously people heard and they sent the questions in. But Councillor Foster raised a very important concern at the last meeting with regard to Council missing an opportunity on giving information about the Black Country Plan in the Council's magazine. Now, Councillor Simon Phipps mentioned how we as councillors all have a responsibility and a duty of care to make our residents aware of the Black Country Plan. Now, in my ward of Kings Winford North and Warleaf, along with my ward colleagues and the amazing Warleafers one, we have distributed leaflets, knocked doors, and held consultations raising awareness about the draft plans. Now, I've heard Labour, led by Councillor Foster, literally screaming that more needs to be done about raising awareness, and I totally agree with you. Yet, in your recent Labour newspaper, which was distributed all over my ward, on how to get, on the consultation, recent Labour newspaper, which was distributed all over my ward, the consultation deadline has not been mentioned, neither information on how to get involved. In fact, the word consultation is actually only mentioned once compared to the 16 times you've mentioned Conservatives. How is this supporting our community? How is this listening to our residents? And Councillor Foster, do you not think this was a missed opportunity?
Do you want me to answer that?
Please.
Not at all. A lot of our Labour group and Labour activists have been working with residents in Kings Winford North. I'm not sure what point you're trying to make. The newsletter included a survey and encouraged people to take part in consultation. And a lot of work has already been done there by councillors, activists in conjunction with the community.
Now, you just mentioned that a lot of you wanted to raise awareness about the consultation, but you've not mentioned the consultation. You've not mentioned when the deadline is as well.
Well, I don't think that matters so much. I mean, I think it's a very small point that you're making. It's the role of the council to engage with its citizens, and councillors like myself and the Labour Party have been doing that. This is not just our only engagement with residents.
So do you not feel...
Can I just this is supposed to be a scrutiny exercise on the Black Country Plan, not a scrutiny exercise about our newsletter, about your newsletter.
I think it's an important part to make residents aware.
Absolutely.
And I'm a bit shocked at Councillor Foster's comments that the deadline does not matter. When at the start of the scrutiny, when we had our first scrutiny, Councillor Foster was raising concerns about extending the consultation. So how can you not say the deadline is not important?
Ask questions.
Which I am to Councillor Foster, if you may.
I think they're trying to score. I think, Chair, somebody is trying to score petty political points.
No, that would
this
be
is not
yourself.
what residents have come to hear.
Okay, Councillor Salim's made his point, and
we want to our final point then.
We could have asked the Leader of the Opposition, but he's left.
Well, I wanted to, unfortunately.
We couldn't. Who was next then? Councillor Foster, you've indicated. Councillor Barnett, you've indicated as well. I saw you before, but are you happy for Councillor Foster to go?
Yes, I have been waiting since the last item, actually, in fairness, Chair. I've got some follow-up questions to ask to officers in response to questions that speakers put to specific officers, if I can take them in no particular order. So there was a question from a resident in I think they're a Bromsgrove resident, commenting on the Worcester Lane issue about education and about capacity in schools. And the officer gave some figures about extra numbers of pupils that it might mean with that housing development, and then was said if it was more than that, then the school would go through an expansion exercise to absorb them. What does that actually mean? Because to some people that might smack of concerns about oversized classes, trying to make the numbers fit when over existing capacity. Perhaps somebody could say a bit more about that.
Okay. In terms of projections coming forwards for schools, we've seen changes in birth rates quite dramatically when we've been talking about ONS, where we had highs in birth rates in the 1990s of over 4,000, a long dip down to 3,300s, 3,400s, and then recently, 2010, 2011, which was the reception intake in 16, 17, there was a bulge coming through, so we had 3,900s. Since then, we've had a reduction. So you'll have various levels of spare capacity in different year groups at different times. When I still look at this process, we're trying to mitigate the effect of housing developments. But we can only go so far forwards on the data we have. So birth data, we could only go 4 or 5 years in advance because we're only just getting that birth data. So the ONS birth data, I think, is just becoming available as 2019-20, although I've got indicative data a bit closer, and it still shows a continued drop. So we're seeing emerging spare capacity at primary coming through as the bulge moves through in the Stourbridge area, and then as it enters secondary, There's capacity in secondary to deal with it as it again passes through. If we move over the whole time period towards 2039, we can't project that far. So the worst case scenario is that we say we have no spare capacity or close to no spare capacity, assuming that we're at a peak and we coped with the peak and we've still got that capacity available. So with a relatively small amount of pupils, 5 per year for primary and 3 per year secondary, that would currently be able to be absorbed easily, and at the peak it would have been a pinch. Now, we can, if the ground changes so that we have more pressure and that we can justify an expansion of 15 pupils or 30 pupils per year group, then we could look for an expansion. But if it's a smaller amount that can be absorbed, then that need moves away. So that's what I meant to my response. So it's trying to work out exactly where you could possibly lie over the period of this plan. Okay.
Thank you for that. And the other comment was the transport. The officer who gave the presentation on transport, and you needn't come to the podium. It's just really a comment with a general question, and that is. Clearly, that transport work is going to be a significant piece of work. And I think, just to make the point again, it must be based on accurate data. It must be based on accurate projections, which makes the work that we've asked public health to do really important. So possibly it's more about making sure that work is done, that the projections are accurate, before officers start to get involved in large pieces of time-consuming work, which ultimately would be led by flawed data unless they receive that information from public health. And the final point was in relation to the question that Kat Eccles made, and the leader's already responded to that, but I can say that in fairness, that comment wasn't made on the radio. I was present, I was witness to a discussion that he had with David Shepherd, the Liberal Democrat, who's a campaigner alongside Kat Eccles, and he made the point to the effect of what Kat Eccles said, but it was more along the lines of, that David wouldn't be unhappy with the outcome. So that was more or less what was said, but not on the radio. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. Shall I do both questions and then we can get people to talk about it? So the first one is about these projection figures for the number of homes that we need to have built in the Dudley Borough. And while, we absolutely should go away and find out what this total projection really should be and is it accurate, my more pressing concern is about the mix of housing or the types of housing. Because I have to tell you, in my casework, in my inbox, the residents that contact me are invariably, they're in private rental housing. The private landlords decided to, make liquid their portfolio, and it seems that you don't sell houses with tenants anymore sitting. You kick them out first. And this is the position they're in. So they have a job locally, they have kids at school locally, they don't want to move. And yet in Quarry Bank, they don't really get a lot of choice because there's very little else that they can do. More expensive private rental housing and no availability of council housing or other social housing. So it seems to me that what Dudley Borough might need is rather a lot more social housing, and I mean social housing, council housing or housing trusts, but certainly with secure, affordable social housing with secure tenancies. And I suppose that question there is about the mix. Do we know exactly how much of this housing we need to build should be social housing for rent and how much of it should be private housing for sale? I'll do the second question. Yeah. Okay, so the other question is very specifically about site DUH 038. It's, excuse me, boundaried by Heath Road, Copse Road and Leebank Road. It's in the Dudleywood area of my ward. I shan't labour this point too long, but the housing estate there was built in the 1940s, I believe. I'm basing this on aerial photos. You go look at these aerial photos that's on the Dudley Gizmo site, which is very interesting to me, you know, and this housing estate pops up sort of around about the 1940s. Prior to that, it was indeed a clay pit, a quarry, and this green space was left as part of the housing development at the time. In its time, it's been given over as green space to residents as a park. It's even had a playground on it in the past. And anecdotally, I was told that residents once approached the council to have some garages built and were turned down on the basis that it was designated as a park and it was for all residents and they weren't building on it. And yet here it is on the Black Country plan, designated as a building site for 24 homes. Not only is it designated as a building site, a potential development site, it appears to have been listed as a brownfield site. And this is what really concerns me, because we've been here before. We've been here before with the development in Saltwells Wood, a piece of land that was left over, designated as brownfield site. A planning application arrived there forthwith because it was a brownfield site and you could build on it. I don't think the planning department have forgotten about Saltwells Wood's site just yet, because it was you know, a bit of a painful experience for everyone. But ultimately, that designation was incorrect. And it's because nature had fully reclaimed that site, and it's the same with DUH 038. It's a green field. It's been a green field for a long time. It's a greenfield site, it's not a brownfield site. I bring this up because I suspect if I went through all these other small green spaces in urban areas, we'd find that also many of those have been designated as brownfield sites, and that this may be a bit misleading to members of the public who are looking at a green field and assuming it's a you know, a greenfield site, it'll be okay, they're not going to build on this, and actually underneath that it's been designated brownfield. So I guess that one's a bit of a roundabout question for the planning department. I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the first one was obviously on the social private housing mix.
Yes.
I don't know who wants to take that one.
Through you, Chair. Paul Griffiths will respond. Thank you.
The affordable housing, council housing. So generally across the Black Country, the difference between need for private and social housing is around 15%, so about 15% of the need is around social housing. In terms of the council has got a modest affordable homes delivery programme for new council housing. We've delivered 400 new homes over the last 10 years, 300 of those have come through in the last 6 years. So generally we're building around 50 or 60 new homes a year. That's due to increase over the next 5 years, where we're looking to deliver around 600 homes over that period. So we actually absolutely agree that we've got an affordable housing programme, and we need to deliver more affordable housing for the council, for council housing. We've got about 180 of those in a pipeline at the moment that are either on site, planning permission awaiting start in the planning process, or about to go to planning. I think what's important about the council's house building programme though is it is not just about providing family housing, it's about providing a wider housing need for affordable housing that's a bit more diverse. So yes, we provide general needs family housing, but we also provide housing for people who've got specific disability needs. We also provide housing for elderly people in sheltered schemes. So we provide a wider range of housing than we get provided elsewhere, but it's all part of the affordable housing mix. But you're absolutely right, we do need to provide more housing, and we have got a programme to do it, and it's around £95 million over the next 5 years to deliver that.
Chair, if I could just comment. I'm quite frankly a little bit shocked that only 15% of the housing we intend to provide is social housing. I find that absolutely remarkable. It just seems highly unlikely that that's correct. It's certainly something that I think this committee should, you know, scrutinise further and have the details of, because I guess, you know, the residents that come to me, they're looking for social housing a lot of the time. You know, if they're looking for a private house to buy, they go to an estate agent, you don't go to your local councillor. But it just seems unlikely. Anyway.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Atkins was next, then it's Councillor Cowell.
Comment on my second.
Sorry, yes, you had 2 questions, didn't you? Yeah.
I've spotted Councillor Zada at the back of the room, and Councillor Salim had some questions. I mean, he may not have actually concluded them if he wanted actually to speak to Councillor Zada, but he's here. I've spotted him at the back of the room.
I think we've made the point on that one, but we may come back to that. If we can go with the second part of the question.
Councillor Barnett, I'm just trying to... It's DUH038, is that correct? Yeah. I can't obviously clarify the top of my head all these, but if I can come back to you after this meeting just to clarify why it's designated, I'd appreciate it. I'll try to do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are for one of our guests, if that's okay. For the gentleman from the CCG. Lovely, still here, fantastic. I know it's been a long night, thank you. So a couple of questions from me, please. The main question is, has the CCG itself been consulted on this increase in housing, and have they submitted a formal response themselves? And we all know about the GP shortage that we're hearing about in the news at the moment. And I know we've talked about Kings Winford and Wall Heath, but it's my ward, so I'm going to talk about it again, if that's okay. We know that a number of houses, 850 odd, are going to be there. Are the CCG confident that that the care of residents will not be impacted with this influx in potential patients into our primary care services?
Yeah, just to answer your question, the first question around consultation, yes, we were consulted. We've had a golden opportunity from the NHS perspective to engage with the councils, and we've been doing that through the Black Country Core Plan and with each of the councils. We've also been engaged with neighbouring CCGs and our neighbouring councils, because some of our GP practices on borders are affected by cross-border development, particularly around sort of north of Wolverhampton, and affected by South Staff. So, yes, to answer your question, we are thoroughly consulted, and we have committed a considerable amount of time and effort into the response, and we've got quite a complex and considered response that's gone into the Black Country Core Plan consultation process. In terms of pressure on GPs, my element of the CCGs for estates, sort of both capital and revenue investment, and looking at projections for both population and housing growth. So in terms of the pressures on GPs, yes, I can't exactly answer your question because that's our primary care directorate that would do that, but in any event, we are addressing through the NHS England, NHS improvement process to encourage and recruit more clinical staff into practice, both at primary and secondary care. But I wouldn't like to say too much on that because it is an ongoing process, and we are, as a primary care commissioner, we are engaged on a daily basis with our primary care providers. In terms of your third question was around Kings Winford.
Yeah, so just highlight, picking up on the fact that your estate's primarily there.
I am, yes.
So has your department identified the required need for estates, taking into account the 2 Kings Winford sites and also the new builds at the top of Stallings Lane, which I imagine will all feed into the same local patch?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we've taken, as I say, we considered every single site that's come forward to it came to us as a matrix. We responded to that on a various number of options of what you could do in various scenarios. Bearing in mind that we do have a comprehensive estate strategy both for the 4 CCGs and as combined now a single Black Country West Birmingham CCG,
which will be reviewed again as we go through into the integrated care system. But that strategy does take into consideration each and every single site or major application. That's, as you know, anything over 10 houses. So that response has been done, and it is, as I say, it's been a pretty comprehensive response by the team.
Are you able to share publicly what sort of estate we need, and then are we able to marry that up with what sort of staff level that we require? Not today, I appreciate, because that's not your area of speciality, but if you could supply that gap analysis, that would be really useful.
We can do that in the fullness of time. At the moment, the estate strategy is going through its review process, which is then got to be validated by NHS England. As I say, it's as part of the consultation process, we've got some response in, or a fairly comprehensive response. There are other factors into the primary care clinical strategy that we're developing at the moment as well. So these are elements which are work in progress and can be released once they've gone through our primary care commissioning committee.
Thank you. I'll hold you to that.
We'll do our best.
Thank you.
Do you want me to answer the question around Kingsmanford?
I think that was the answer really. What is going to be the skills gap for the
that's fine.
for the clientele really, for the residents.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Foster, you had a follow-up question?
I'm a bit concerned about the process, Chair. On the 1st of September, we had something that was a really poor meeting, and I had hopes that this would be an improvement, but it's very unstructured. We've got here a number of themes that we need to explore, but unfortunately, some of the questions certainly that we've got relate to a report that was presented at a previous committee that isn't in front of us this evening, and which I thought would be. And we seem to be going all over the place with the different themes. And I'm concerned that we haven't necessarily got the right professionals either to respond to some of these questions. Okay, well, so my aspiration was actually to do a theme-by-theme session with, for example, a range of people from healthcare who could respond to most of the questions, because the gentleman here, in fairness to him, he can't respond to the questions that we need to have answers to. So I'm just a bit disappointed that it's not more structured and there hasn't been more of an explanation as to how this was going to work at the start.
Well, we've taken the topics that we've covered tonight, which I think was one of your suggestions, and we've got people here who we thought could answer those, and we've got to try to get a wide range of people.
As
So
I explained to the Democratic
we've got them.
Services.
Let's just ask some questions, and if there are questions at the end, then we can talk about that.
Yeah. What about the paper though that was
later on.
before us? We've got some. What about the paper that was before us last time that we've got some questions on that isn't with the papers tonight?
Well, we've got the papers we've got tonight are the ones we've got tonight, aren't they? This meeting, and we've had an agenda, so we need to ask questions on this agenda.
Before they were published, I spoke to Democratic Services, and there were some outstanding questions to a paper that we had presented, which we understand the paper itself hasn't changed or had to be updated, and I thought it would be with the papers.
Is this the list of questions that you brought last time that you didn't ask?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but there are some questions on there that relate to a report that was presented previously, which we thought would be with the papers tonight, which we would be referring to page numbers, etc. But that report isn't before us tonight.
Well, you could have asked the questions at the last meeting then when you had the
We
report.
didn't have time. If you remember, Chair, the meeting descended into chaos and everyone went home upset.
Yeah, because you didn't ask any questions. If you'd have asked the questions on the night when
we
the
didn't
report
have
was
time
there,
to ask the
I think we
questions,
just need to
Chair.
carry on really asking questions tonight. Councillor Cowell's indicated to ask a question, so I'd be happy to carry on.
It's a very poor show again, I'm afraid. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got four really. The first two I think are grouped and really are around planning obligations. And they are actually linked to an extent to that document, but I can generalise them. Basically, should we or can we block planning applications that will generate a requirement for funding for health or education facilities? If we don't have the power to block applications where they are going to sort of generate extra requirements, and the developer's unable to pay through the appropriate 106, etc., then where will those funds come from?
someone take that question? Helen?
Through you, Chair. So when we receive a planning application, we will obviously consider it at that point in time, and against that, the current planning obligations SPD, so whatever policies we have in place for infrastructure at that point. So to answer your question, if it generates a need, but for viability reasons, I think is the point you're making, that the developer cannot afford it, then the local planning authority and the committee making the decision has a number of choices. It can assess that viability information and decide that there is a case to answer, and then either reduce those obligations or remove them, if committee are happy to do that, or ultimately that proposal may be refused because it is unable to provide that infrastructure. So it's a process that will be gone through the planning application. We will apply the policy at the time. If they argue viability, we will consider it, but it is within the council's gift to either accept a lower level, if that is acceptable, or you can refuse planning applications on the grounds that they result in needs that cannot be met. So each case would have to be considered on its merits at that point in time.
Following on from that, if we allow an application where the requirements aren't met by the developer, does that then fall back on the public purse? I mean, that might be a matter perhaps for the education or the CCG to answer, but is that where the funding will come from? Is it basically down to the public purse?
I think it's very difficult to answer that in generalities without knowing what the specific infrastructure is. There are a number of ways infrastructure can be funded, and ultimately we would have to make the decision at the time if it was acceptable for that development to progress without that funding in place. But there, you know, I can't say that it wouldn't be the case. It depends on the infrastructure, Councillor Cowell.
Just another couple, Chair, if that's okay.
That's fine, yeah. Questions being asked.
Following on actually from some of the comments earlier around affordable housing, again in the document that we did have last time, it was suggested that 32.7% of housing needs to be affordable over the plan period. And I understand the target, we're setting a minimum requirement on sites of between 10 and 30%. Now, my sort of basic maths would tend to indicate if we're only setting a target, in some cases below 30 and no higher than 30%, we're going to struggle to meet 32.7%. So that's the first question, sort of what's going on with those numbers. And the other thing, obviously, is there was a slight discrepancy then with what Paul said earlier on, which he was talking about 15%. Oh, sorry, that was, yeah, yeah.
Just to clarify the affordable housing, what Paul was suggesting was for, the question was asked for social rent and affordable rent, which is about 15%. Those figures have come out of the latest strategic housing market assessment, which was produced in 2020-21, which is informing the Black Country Plan. We are required to do that when we update. We did it in 2017, we updated it. So 15.7% of new homes should be affordable social rent. Just over 8% is for shared ownership, which is affordable, and just over 8% and 9% towards first homes, which is the government policy that a percentage of affordable housing needs to be for first homes, and that's owner occupation but reduced below market value, which comes to around about 32% across the Black Country in terms of affordable housing. Where we have we're proposing a new affordable housing policy, which is basically looking at, based on spatial geographical areas across the Black Country in terms of housing market areas, low, medium and high value areas. That's on the back of the viability work that we've undertaken to inform the plan. And we're looking at those areas where the most viable, high value areas, we're looking at 30% affordable housing requirement, goes down to 20% and then down to 10%. That's because, as we've already discussed, there are viability issues with some of our sites. So that's the proposed affordable housing policy that we're putting forward. We're hoping that we can achieve a higher affordable housing figure on some of those more profitable, more viable sites. We're hoping also that where we're doing our own development, such as Dudley Council building their own houses, Wolverhampton and Sandwell also build their own houses, that we can achieve more affordable housing on those sites as well. And that's what we're aiming to do in terms of providing our affordable housing requirement. Obviously, it will differ, the type across each local authority and each local area about what we'll be seeking affordable housing requirements on each site.
So this sort of 32.7%, is that a target for Dudley or is that across the Black Country?
That's across the Black Country.
Okay.
We haven't actually worked it down yet to local authority level because that will be a piece of work we do. We'll produce a supplementary planning document on the back of the Black Country plan for each local authority, and that will narrow it down more to a local authority area and the types of tenures that we'll be looking to seek.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And the final question, Chair, was around electric vehicle charging points. Okay. I'm having all sorts of fun with those at the moment. I gather there's a plan through highways to introduce a relatively small number, but there's a particular issue, I think, within council housing stock. Some of those houses aren't suitable for EV charge points, and it's not entirely clear to me how we're going to go about gaining access, particularly where residents are disabled. That will certainly affect council housing stock and indeed the general stock. Having a small number of central charge points is fine if you can park your car and go for a little trot round, but if you can't actually mobilise, somehow or other we've got to get round this issue of not being able to have charge points on the doorstep. I just wondered if there was any work going on to resolve that.
Yep, okay. Anybody?
So sorry, can I just ask what that's got to do with the Black Country plan?
It's within highways infrastructure.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we're building new houses, we need to know that there's a plan that how they're going to get over this EV charging, you know, because they could have a row on a road, couldn't they? Or so yeah, I get what you mean, but I think it's.
Okay, I can answer that question. I would say there is a plan at the moment, so we have just secured some funding for on-street residential charging, EV charging. In terms of wider residential points, that is a work in progress at the moment. So I'd probably say that the solution for that would come in advance of the plan. It would be over the next 3 to 4 years. So there is funding being made available at a regional level and a national level to tackle that. It's just working at viable solutions. Each area have got different problems that we've got to work through. So there is a team in place at the moment across the 4 local authorities looking at that in more detail, and it will probably start to emerge over the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor, you indicated, yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Just a bit of a general question, if I can, please. In the plan, there seems to be a divide between the sites that have already been designated for development in the past and new sites that are now being brought forward for the first time. Could obviously cause some confusion. How can the residents and ourselves as members see that sites are just the ones that are being proposed in the past and which are now being proposed for the first time?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, in the allocations, in the document, the allocation section, the first column, the second column actually after the reference number tells you whether it's been previously allocated before. So the not previously allocated would be the newer sites that would come in. You'll see a reference in that column where it's come from a previous designation, like the development strategy, for example. So we do identify them. If you, Vicky, have we got a better way of identifying that other than the table, or is that just the best way to find out what's new and what isn't? Sorry. We'll have to get it.
Apologies, I didn't hear all the question, but the table, the allocations table 14 in Dudley's allocation chapters lists all the housing sites. It lists, as Carl said, in the second column, it tells you which ones are carried forward, which are currently adopted in the development strategy or various AAPs. It also picks up where there's nothing in that second column. It may be because it's a new site which has been assessed as part of the site assessment process we've been doing for this plan, or sometimes it may be because it's what's known as a SHLA site. That's a site that's been identified suitable for housing, sometimes based on a positive pre-application or an application, and it's included in the SHLA, which is the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, which we update every year. And that's basically capturing all our land supply. And what we've tried to do in the plan Where we've got SLAR sites, which haven't got a formal plan allocation, we want to basically allocate that site, protect that site for housing potential, and that's then included in our overall housing figures.
Okay, any follow-up to that?
Nothing.
No? Okay, thank you. Councillor Zada wanted to speak.
The question's been answered now by, well, partially answered by Judy, but I mean, maybe you would like to answer this question. I had a few residents come to see me deeply concerned about receiving your recent newspaper with a headline reading, "Today our green spaces are here for us and next year under conservative development they will go." Now that newspaper obviously is your leaflet, and as you're aware, the plans won't be adopted until 2024. So this headline is a blatant lie. And if anything, this newspaper is playing with people's mental health. And as you guys, leader and deputy leader of the opposition, I ask that you apologise to my residents for playing with their mental health and misleading them.
Okay. Thanks, and thank you, Councillor Salim, for the question. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I think what you're saying is a leaflet went out, and obviously you're concerned about the content. Is that broadly what you're saying?
That's right. I believe your headline is misleading.
I'll tell you what, I mean, if you want to talk about misleading, what's misleading at the minute is what I'm witnessing tonight, where we've got wrong sites, data that's inaccurate. We've got 8,000 employees of this council, and what I've heard tonight is we can't find a single one of them to go and correct the data, and we are making decisions, misleading data. We're making decisions on that. With the greatest respect to colleagues here, some on this side and this side have been asking questions about health, and the gentleman that's come here hasn't been able to answer those questions. I want to be clear about my role and what the role of the local authority is. My role is as leader of the opposition, and I oppose every single square centimetre of building on any green space and green belt. The role of the authority, the council, is to provide accurate information on which people can consult, have meaningful consultations that takes into account people's ability to respond, so not have a consultation solely reliant on digital. Make sure that they send out information in good time, not 1 week before the consultation closes. Make sure that they take on board...
Sorry, can I just make a point
you
on
want
that?
me to answer the question? I'm happy to carry on.
You've not answered the question at all.
I'll get down to the question. I know you don't like the answer, but the answer is the answer. So that is the role of this authority's officers, and there are 8,000 of them, to provide that information. So if you want to look to me to lead the consultation, I'm happy to do it. And I'll make sure it's meaningful. I'll make sure people can respond. I'll make sure it's not done during the summer holidays and a whole raft of other things that the people behind me are screaming out. And the other thing I will make sure that we do is listen to the people with their concerns, and rather than dismiss them. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them as well.
So do you echo what your deputy said, where the consultation deadline is not important?
What I absolutely advocate is that you give people sufficient time to respond in, and it's not my role or the deputy leader of the opposition or your role or any of your colleagues to provide good, meaningful consultation with the deadlines. So if you are expecting us, Councillor Salim, to provide detail on the consultation process, then there are real questions to be asked about what the officers that are leading the consultation are doing. So I think this is you're asking the wrong people about the consultation. I agree with you, by the way. I agree with you entirely that the consultation is inadequate, and that's one of the things that I'm asking the officers. This consultation is inadequate. We're on the same page here. But if you're asking the Labour group to prop up the consultation, then we'll do that too.
No, I'm asking for clarification more than anything else, and you've still not answered two of the questions I've asked. First of all, your article that you sent out is misleading. I've had two residents come to me very upset, really upset, literally were crying to me, and it affects people's mental health, and you've still not apologised for that. Secondly, your deputy has said the deadline is not important, and I'm asking you, are you echoing that, or?
So let me try again, because we're not getting through to each other here. It's not the role of me or my deputy to lead the consultation that's accurate. That isn't our role. That's the role of officers. Happy to take it on, by the way.
So the bottom line is, you are not apologising for playing with people's
Well, I
mental health.
apologise that this council has led such a pathetic consultation, and I happen to be a councillor. That's the apology that I'm prepared to give.
So you're not apologising for
Well,
playing
I've just
with people?
apologised. I apologise as a councillor
Okay,
of
I
this
think-
borough
Thank you.
that
I
this
think-
consultation is inadequate.
We've
And
had
I
to-
apologise to you guys that this council is not listening.
We've had,
Thank you.
we've had the chance to reply, and I don't think you can accuse us of not listening when we've held three public events where the members of the public have been able to come and ask questions in this very room,
As proposed by the Labour
as no other authority in the Black Country Plan have done. But we have done it. We've held public meetings as well. Okay, thank you. Councillor Islam, you wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you have been very engaging, Chair, and I'd like to thank you for that. But you know yourself, we can't say what happens tonight as though nothing happened the day before. Right? The public sessions and the nature, the way this scrutiny is being conducted tonight hasn't come out of the blue. It has come out of a process. And I'm sorry to see the way it's going on. We're supposed to be scrutinizing what is the best thing to go into or come out of the Black Country Plan. But what I just saw in the last few minutes, right, was an attempt to point score. And I think that is not part of scrutiny. Right. Let me come back to what I'm here for. Chair, my question is about life expectancy in this area of in the whole country, the Black Country, and then green spaces, and why are they important? So my question is about life expectancy. Let's put this in context. Over the last 11 years, and I will try not to be party political, I'm referring to life expectancy and things in relation to life expectancy. Over the last 11 years, as we all know, life expectancy is coming down generally throughout the country. That's number one. Number two, as we all know, mental health is very, very important factor in our lives, and we have seen that mental health is taking more and more attention from all of us. You already mentioned that, and quite rightly so. So we should be looking at those things that contribute towards mental health and try to firstly mitigate, and secondly to making sure that the mental health is properly treated and resources made available. One of the resources for mental health is our environment, our green spaces. And so I would urge colleagues when they're looking at this plan, and I urge officers to, particularly the CCG colleagues, to look at the impact of the loss of green spaces And as you noticed throughout tonight and throughout my previous meetings, I haven't ignored the bigger chunks of land, bigger pieces of land, but I have also drew your attention to the consequences of losing those smaller spaces throughout the borough. So my question is, how are we going to address the life expectancy which is coming down throughout the country? Oh, incidentally, you may or may not be aware that the gap between Dudley North and Dudley South in relation to expectancy, I don't know the exact figure, but it is around 7 to 8 years, which is by all measure and by all means a huge gap. As I said many years ago, in one of the select committees, a grandfather can miss a grandchild, or a would-be grandfather can miss a grandchild because of that very fact of 8 years or 7 years of gap of life expectancy. So please, when we are looking at this plan, we bear that in mind, that the green spaces are not only small spaces in built-up areas to provide us with better air, but also they are means of exercising, they are means of taking our minds off things that sometimes go on very badly in here and then responsible for heart attacks, heart conditions, and exacerbation of diabetes and medical conditions like that. I hope I made my point clear.
You certainly have, and I don't think there'd be anybody in the room that disagrees with, you know, how important. In fact, I think Councillor Sleam asked a similar question at another scrutiny meeting. You know, these small spaces are just as important as the big ones, you know, for people being able to exercise and get out into the fresh air. Thank you. I don't know if any officers want to make comments on that one. No, I think it's just taken the point. Is there anybody else that wants to ask Councillor Rogers?
Thank you, Chair. Usually I wait for Councillor Islam to wrap up a meeting with his wise words, but I've just got a few things to ask on behalf of the residents. Getting back to why we're here tonight, looking at fundamentally the CCG and making use of our education friend as well. How many more residents would it take to build a new GP surgery, or would they be directed to one of our larger surgeries such as Lion Health, which is already oversaturated? You have already closed smaller local surgeries such as Wollaston and Norton recently and promised Lion Health would cope, but they simply can't, and residents are at present struggling for even basic GP healthcare. Can you answer that for me? Particularly looking at my sort of area, Worsley, Kingsford, Wall Heath, where we've got a potential of 1,000 new homes, looking at possibly on average 3 to 4 bed houses. So you've got potentially 4,000 residents. So how many more residents would it take for us to build a new GP surgery?
As part of our estate strategy, we do factor in housing growth. We are factoring housing growth and general population growth as the guidance from DHSC. The area you're talking about is actually a strategic priority for us, and we are working up schemes at the moment. We do have a number of schemes across the Black Country which are in the pipeline to respond to the pressures of our existing GP practices and the housing growth, the population growth, as it sort of is occurring now, and it will occur in the future. So yes, we are responding to that. We are developing schemes where we are putting together GPs, and again, it's engaging with our primary care colleagues to work together to develop new hubs where you've got sort of multi-tenanted buildings, multi-tenanted premises with GP providers or primary care and secondary care providers to provide additional, better, improved healthcare services for our patients. So yes, to answer your question, there are projects afoot that are coming forward to
respond to those pressures.
And you could cope with an extra 4,000 residents in that small area?
It is. We have got a scheme coming forward, which, as I say, is in our private primary care commissioning committee at the moment that we are developing. But we're always looking for new schemes as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Also, looking at education, our education friend was looking at answering a question for Worcester Road development, which is 110 houses, I think, or 103, and mentioned 5 primary school and 3 potential secondary school pupils out of 110. I personally think that's a little conservative. I think there's going to be virtually nearly double that. So if you're looking at the site of Wall Heath and the Triangle, where we've got 1,000 potential new houses, I personally think there, with a potential 4,000 residents, you're going to have way more than the 80 projected children on those 2 sites. Well, I know the developer has plans possibly to implement a primary school to the Triangle. Obviously, you can't determine how many children until they start to come in, but at a recent meeting we said, we heard that they have the potential of building 80 to 90, 100 homes if 2 developers join forces and build at the same time. So in, say, 3 years of it being accepted, we've got the potential of 300 houses over the 3 or 4 years to complete the 1,000 houses. Have you got the infrastructure to build a new secondary school to accommodate the potentially 400 secondary school age children?
Okay. In terms of housing yields, they tend to fit in with what other LAs report as well from their own analysis. With the housing mix of 20% 2-bed, 50% 3-bed and 30% 4 bedrooms, we'd expect to get 27 primary age pupils per 100 units and 14 secondary age pupils per 100 units. So if you multiply that by 10, you get 270 primary age pupils and 148 secondary pupils. Then we break that down into year groups. At primary, that's 7. So you're talking 40, approximately 40 per year group. And at secondary, talking 140 divided by 5, so that's 28. You couldn't create a secondary school with 28 pupils per year, just one form entry going through. That'd be difficult. And in terms of expansions, we've had expansions at Crestwood and Wordsley of 2 forms each, and there would be options to have further expansions. So you're talking potentially 1 form of entry there for a further expansion. But then again, it depends on the pressures coming through in terms of births, which we can only forecast so far. At primary, you can either go for a number of expansions of current schools, or you can look for the option of holding back a section of land from the larger developments. So if you hold back, I think the recommendation from the DFE is 2.4 hectares for a primary school, and you could build a 1 form entry primary school and build it in such a way that it could be expanded more easily to 2 form entry, so that you make the process easier down the line. That would be an option as well. So when we've spoken about this with planning, we've highlighted the fact that it could be expansions and or it could be a new site that we look for from the developer, and that's how we'd meet that need. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment really from today and also the consultation. It's refreshing really to see the public and how passionate they are about the local areas. I think about 20 years ago the council were looking very local and began the designations of local nature reserves, local spaces, local parks, and that was for the basic concept of keeping these little green spaces open just for kids to kick a ball or the wildlife, getting out, walkers, cyclists, and we've been concentrating, fair enough, on the big green belt sites, but again, echoing colleagues, we shouldn't overlook the importance of our smaller green spaces at local level. They were important then, and they're so important now for the benefits to the wildlife and for their perpetuity. So I just hope the officers realise the importance of our local areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got no one else indicating to speak, so we'll wrap up that part of the agenda. So we move now on to item number 8, which is future meetings. Now I have a proposal for this, and that is that we add an agenda item to the next corporate scrutiny meeting, and in that agenda item we agree our recommendations on the response to the consultation. Myself and the chair will produce those with your feedback as well, which you can provide to us. And then we can also consider any future meetings. We did say we'd have 2, but obviously the consultation ends on the 11th, on Monday. And we have asked tonight for some work in regards to the population figures. And also we are waiting for the highways reports, and I think it would be useful if we had those before we continue any further scrutiny. So that is my proposal. Have I got a seconder?
Second.
Sorry, Chair, you were third before me.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just make some comments first. I didn't know whether to make those comments in the part of the meeting just finished or now, because I think it's important that you do take this into consideration. The second part of the meeting was absolutely chaos. Now, I'm not sure in terms of scrutiny whether that's lack of experience on that side, bar maybe one person, in terms of how to conduct the scrutiny. Now, you've invited a whole range of, or at least it comes across has been shared only to one side. So it's really not a good way of doing scrutiny exercise as such. Now, I believe, and Councillor Foster may add to this, we've submitted a list of experts to invite so they can come along and give us their view, and then we can question them. Now, none of that has happened, and even the experts who are here today, the way it should have happened is they should have been given that 5-minute slot to come along and talk about their views on the actual Black Country Plan. So we can then challenge them on their assertions or their assumptions. That should have been the process, and that's how scrutiny should be carried out. So I think you do need to carefully consider, go back, obviously talk to the chair who's not here today, and talk to the lead officer in how to conduct a scrutiny meeting, and then maybe circulate that to us via an email, rather than to wait till the next meeting and then we can't agree something. We need to get this sorted. Yes, the consultation is closing, but our process hasn't concluded.
I'm not saying it has.
Yeah, and
it's running until 2024, so that, there's going to be plenty of opportunities.
And we need to come up with a set of recommendations. I mean, even say, for example, the one policy this council council is good at writing policies, but not implementing them. I mean, health impact assessment. Now, can you or someone here tell us, has an health impact assessment done of the Black Country Plan in terms of what that means for us? Or will it be done? Now, I don't know whether anyone can provide an answer to that. But I'll leave it there. I think you do need to really carefully look at the consultation.
I take your points on board. I think we've achieved quite a lot tonight with the public asking questions and councillors asking questions. We've had expert witnesses as well that have all spoken to us. So I think we've gleaned some good information that we can use as part of the consultation process that we've got left. Councillor Rogers, you wanted to...
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I'll second your proposal, but in the meantime, I'll just say, for those councillors that do bother to read their emails and look in preparation to tonight's meeting, it's all there on the email. We've got all the people, officers coming from the Black Country West Birmingham CCG, Director of Transport, Intelligence Analysis, Traffic Management, Head of Housing Assets. They're all there. They're all on the emails. So yes, I'll second it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rogers. I've just had the email forwarded to me, and everybody who's here is on that email. So it was sent out.
Maybe you should conduct it properly.
Thank you. So are we agreed that we had the extra item on the agenda at the next meeting? Discuss it there.
I've been indicating again. I was,
Sorry,
yeah,
so Councillor Foster,
you
carry
seem
on.
to be doing that a lot, Chair.
I'm not doing it on
I might
purpose.
start to take it personally, Ed. Yeah, my comment following on from what Councillor Ali said is really about the structure of these sessions. And he is right. We had hoped that we would actually be hearing theme by theme from the professionals and have an opportunity to question them and any expert witnesses as well. There are a list of, when I say expert witnesses, these are independent people with some academic background who can comment impartially and have no, if you like, they have no skin in the game in terms of what their views are. They are objective. And there are still quite a lot of questions that haven't been asked yet. As I said, the last meeting on the 1st of September somewhat ended in a bit of chaos. A lot of people weren't allowed to ask the questions. I wasn't allowed to speak by the chair. So we ran out of time. So we have still got some questions left. It's just that it's come to a natural time to break. If you can see it that when we next meet, whenever that is, I think it would be important. I think it's important for transparency for the public that there's a time frame now, that you put together a time frame so we're clear where we now stand with the process and when we might get the opportunity to pick up those outstanding questions.
Okay.
And when we might get those witnesses to question as well.
Okay, well, we can discuss this in the agenda item at the next meeting. But we've been transparent. We've been on YouTube tonight, so everybody can see, and I know people are watching and really getting involved with it. And someone asked me the question, could people ask questions via YouTube? And I think that's probably quite a good idea as well. So if people struggle to get here via, with a disability or whatever, or transport difficulties, but we would need somebody to screen those and be able to process those. So that's something we may look into for future meetings as well. Steve's probably just giving me daggers, but we want to engage with people and we want to give people the opportunity to ask questions. So thank you, but I shall report back to the chair that that's what we've decided. Agenda item 9, any questions to the chair?
None for this meeting, Chair.
That wraps the meeting up. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.